Good evening and welcome to the Township of Woolwich Special Council budget meeting this January 12th, 2023. And it's nice to see people in the council chambers again. And I know there are many people watching at home. I'll remind council that this meeting is being recorded and live streamed to YouTube. And we're just getting rid of an echo. Okay, I'll do a roll call of council for the benefit of people watching from home. I'm Mayor Johnson, present and chairing this meeting. Councillor Bryant, Councillor Burgess,
Present.
Councillor Cadeau,
Present.
Councillor Grant, and Councillor Schwint.
Present.
Thank you. We need a motion that council reconvenes in open session. Moved by Councillor Grant, seconded by Councillor Bryant. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. I'd like to start by acknowledging that the land on which we meet has been here from time immemorial. People have inhabited Southern Ontario, for about 10,000 years, and we recognize the Attawandaron, Anishinaabe, and Haudenosaunee peoples who lived here when settlers arrived and who share this land with us. May we together learn to care for and respect each other, our flora and fauna, and the land we inhabit together. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest this evening? Seeing none, we will start with our delegations. But first I have some instructions that I need to read to you. You have a maximum of 7 minutes to speak unless council or the clerk has set a different time. And I don't believe that we have. There will be a timer on the screen and you'll hear a warning when you have 1 minute and when your time is up. Once you're finished, please wait for questions of clarification from council. When there are no more questions for you, please turn off your microphone and camera again. But I think everyone is joining us in the council chambers. Is that right, Clerk Smith? Are all the delegations in? All but one? Okay. You may listen into the rest of the meeting or leave when you want. Council discussion and debate will start after all questions from council. So again, thanks for coming in, and we will start by hearing from Sandra Bray, Climate Action Manager proposal. Welcome, Sandra.
Oh, thank you. Okay. My mouse out here so I can see what I'm doing. Well, it's really nice to see you all in person. I've seen you in your election brochures and so on, but I wasn't at any of the council meetings or the pre-election meetings, so it's nice to meet you all in person. Good evening, Mayor Shans, Councillors Burgess, Bryant, Cadeau, Grant, Schwint, and good evening to staff. I'm here this evening to request that council budget for the salary of a climate action manager to lead our Woolwich community in reducing our emissions by 50% by 2030, which we've committed to, and to producing our own clean energy. Oh, hi, Jeff. Can we get my slides up, please? Thank you. There we go. And next slide, please. Here we go. So 2 categories I'd like to talk with you tonight about: my personal experience, because it is represents a couple of the main points that I think Woolwich needs to take and can learn from my experience, and then the rationale for Woolwich. Next slide, please. So for those of you who don't know me, I was born on a farm up near Orillia, Ontario. I have deep roots in the generations of the farming community. I come from a people of faith who really valued stewardship of the land. Next slide, please. During my first period living in Elmira, I managed my own small investment company, and I also co-founded Apt Environment in 1989 to address the jeopardy that Elmira was in due to local chemical industry contamination. My current period living in Elmira, I have had an 18-year path of to get myself to freedom from fossil fuel burning. I reduced emissions initially in this house by increasing the insulation, adding a solar hot water, and of course the plan next was new windows and doors. I had to pivot because photovoltaics became available through the microfit program, and that seemed to make a lot of sense. And during that period of time, the other thing that happened was, part of it was the history of Woolwich. I became pretty discouraged, and I also took the Al Gore training at that point to kind of keep me going, and took some university courses through the University of Pittsburgh with climate scientist, Dr. Michael Mann. Next slide, please. After working on my house with the photovoltaics, I bought an electric vehicle. My car was getting old and there was an incentive, so it seemed like the perfect time. My most recent step was to put in an air source heat pump because my furnace had a part that couldn't be repaired, and there was an incentive as well. The windows and doors are still waiting. So over this period of time, this shows you the emissions that I've been managed to reduce through the work at my house. The incentives averaged out over the years that I've been working on this, the investment that I put in myself over the years, and the income savings that I have annually. The reason this worked was because I had an overall picture of my situation. I knew about my house, I knew about the incentives, I knew about my bank account, I knew my values and priorities. I was able to pivot when doors opened, and even without the financial incentives, as you can see, my financial picture has improved. Here are the three things that I think we need to think about. Oh, next slide, please. Sorry, I forget to say that. Then three things we need to think about as far as Woolwich is concerned. Now next slide, please. We're not going to feel bad about the opportunity costs that we've missed, but in reality, we've missed some golden opportunities over the past few years, like in the millions. We have 7 more years to meet our 50% reduction promise. By the time we even get somebody in place, it'll be 6 years. That's a lot to accomplish. As money becomes available, Woolwich needs someone with knowledge and an overall view of the entire operations of not just the corporation, but the entire community of Woolwich to be able to explain, recommend, and guide us on a desired pivot. You can ask me about my pivoting experience if you would like. Next slide, please. This chart from 2014 gives us an example of how much money we are sending out of our regional economy to other country and provincial economies. For Woolwich alone, a very rough calculation indicates that we are sending $80 to $90 million every year. It's astonishing, out of our local economy for energy that accelerates climate change and that we could be producing cleanly ourselves. Next slide, please. Lake Erie's winds and waves during the recent storm clearly indicated that climate is changing faster than any of the models anticipated. The logical outcome is that more grants and incentives will be coming, and we need to be positioned to step up as the doors open, be able to pivot as we can. By their past action, previous councils and staff have laid the groundwork. I have a list of years of things that councils and staff have employed. Every year since 1999, efforts have been made to move us towards reducing our emissions and producing clean energy. All Woolwich departments have a role in reducing emissions, as is outlined in the Transform Waterloo Region document. We have a dedicated staff, many who want to make a career mark and will actually leave if they don't have the opportunity to do something meaningful. You are I can't believe you, our current council. You're perfect for this task. I look over your combined skill set and your knowledge and your experience, and I just think we've got it made with you. You have bright energy of a new group. This is the beginning of your mandate. We have an opportunity of 4 years for you to do something major and bold that will show results. The public voted with climate change as a priority in the last election, and voters really deserve to see results. They won't see results if you wait for 2 more years. They'll see results if you do it now. Next slide, please. I think this is actually my second last slide, so not bad. If we're realistic, climate difficulties are increasing and always will. They're not going to stop in our lifetime. Our emissions are accelerating climate breakdown, and shirking the hard work has put us all in a bad situation. The public, there are going to be public who cheer hiring a climate action manager. There are going to be those who complain, but nobody's going to think it's a waste. And public support can be gained through sensitive communication. I'm sure of that. Finding a match. My recommendation is that we find an engineer with climate focus. C.D. Howe is my great hero. He was given the assignment to have us win World War II, and he did. He saw the task that needed to be done. He's a great person to read about. You can find out four great categories, I guess, of actions that he took, and he was very successful. So I think I like the idea of an engineer, maybe an accountant, because they have such an overall picture of everything that's going on. Realistically, time will never be better. Oh, last slide, please. Realistically, the timing will never be better. The challenges of hiring a climate action manager are manageable, and Woolwich Township needs to show that everybody has to participate and to boldly demonstrate what can be done. We did it last year when we were the only municipality to vote for no farmland for development. Like, that was Woolwich. So thank you for listening, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, Sandra. Ms. Bray.
Thank you.
Are there any questions? Councillor Schwint.
Just a quick one. Thanks for your presentation and suggestion. Curious, you're suggesting a climate action manager. Is that the only way to accomplish your goal, or could we get better or a broader set of ideas if we had community involvement?
I think we've done really well in the community with community involvement thus far. That's why we've got thousands of trees planted that we would never have before. We've got trails. I think for the overall view, the actual education for that has only even been within the universities and colleges in the last 10 years. So anyone who has that expertise and hopefully even some experience is going to be somebody who probably doesn't have the time to devote that we need. When I was thinking about this, we need somebody, a volunteer can't make this their absolute Woolwich, their absolute first priority, to be available for meetings on call, to be following the grant situation and know that's come up, we've got to pivot. And how do I get that to happen? With a committee, that's really hard to do. To have to, like, what I see happening is that all of our departments, I think I know what I'm saying when I say this, I hope I'm correct. All of our departments have projects and plans very well laid out, and they know what they're doing. And when opportunities come up, there's going to have to be a meeting to say, oh, we have a chance with this open door. That means we might have to leave that project and come back to it if in 5 years, and that's a logical thing to do. I still don't have my windows and doors done, but my photovoltaics are paid off now, and they're putting money in a bank account to pay for my windows and doors. So that's going to be a bonus that way. The expertise that these people need, like, I could give you the job description. It's beyond my pay grade. I had to copy it from the web because it's just huge. And I don't see us being able to pull that off with a committee that is doing it sort of in their spare time, where people might move or have new obligations in terms of personal lives. I really feel we need somebody who can make it their job and that they become familiar with all the departments. I know senior admin has been working for 3 years to try and get this to work in terms of partnerships with other communities. It hasn't worked. Like and now we're 3 years down the line and we haven't made the gains that we need to make. So that's why I feel like now is really important. Thanks for the question.
Councillor Burgess, excuse me.
Yeah, through you, Mayor Sean, to the delegate. Thank you for your comments. You kind of touched on it briefly there, but has any of the other local municipalities or the region kind of got a position like that already filled that have taken the lead on it, or would we be the one kind of starting this trend?
The region has a couple of positions. I don't think any of the cities would have positions. Sandra or David, can you speak to that a little more?
I was just going to say, I think that we're for the rural municipalities, and our needs are definitely different. I don't think there's anyone else, but if things work out the way I think they might, we're the largest one. So if things work out the way they might, if we have a full-time person, I can see that person being sought out by other municipalities. Wilmot did something when that $1 million grant came up. They managed to somehow or other through their current staff get things organized enough that they applied and they got a grant. They got over $100,000 for trails on that one. That's the only one I know of, and that was done within house, and that was about 5 years ago, maybe 6 years ago. So yeah, we're it.
Okay.
That's another reason I think we should go for it.
Mr. Brenneman?
Yeah, I think through you, Madam Mayor, to council and to Councillor Burgess's question specifically, I think the best way to answer your question is this. When the previous council and many other councils, or all the councils across the region, endorsed the Transform WR strategy, what that meant was every municipality was endorsing between 40 to 50 specific recommendations for the area municipalities to be able to work on and be able to accomplish to meet the 80 by 50 target, because the Transform WR strategy related to the 80 by 50. Now, there was also the other resolution that was adopted in terms of being aggressive in terms of the 50 by 20, 50 by 2030. No, sorry.
50 by 30, I think.
50 by 30, yes. So, you know, I think what Ms. Bray is identifying is that when Woolwich Council adopted the Transform WR strategy, what's been difficult is how are we going to accomplish those 40 to 50 recommendations that were endorsed as part of passing the resolution that we're going to hit 80 by 2050, 80% reduction by 2050.
Councillor Grant.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Shantz, to Mr. Petherick. I'm just wondering if we have where this would fall within the budget. Would this be under recreational services or another department? And then is it possible for to get a reflection of that, how it would look in the budget if we voted for this?
Yeah, through you, Madam Mayor. Typically, this type of a position has been within the Recreation and Community Services. So I think it's very timely that we're talking about it tonight, considering this is the budget that we are going to be discussing. I think from this position, we were looking at it, and I think we were looking at probably a 2023 all in about 100,000 would have been the cost if you would do that for the full year.
Any other questions? Thank you, Ms. Bray. You can leave them with you've got one for each of us. You can leave them, just leave them with Jeff. He'll make sure we get them. Thank you. And thank you for your leadership and your input over the years. Appreciate that. Oh, Mr. Brenneman.
Yeah, I just wanted to take this opportunity actually to personally and professionally thank Sandra for the work that she's been doing with Ann Roberts. You know, certainly we would not be where we're at in terms of having something on our website with appropriate profile. But more importantly, not only the events that got started last year, but you may be aware through council orientation, we talked about the fact that we have a green team internally. The green team was updated by Ann Roberts at our from Rec and Community Services at our last meeting about all of the events that are proposed and planned for this year. Again, this has more to do with changing the attitudes and culture and educate the public on what's possible in terms of sustainability and climate change. So I just thought, we're web streaming here. Sandra should be thanked for the fact that to date, we wouldn't have been able to do what we have been doing if we didn't have volunteers like herself supporting those efforts.
Thank
Yeah.
you very much. That's lovely.
Thank you. We do have wonderful volunteers in the township. I think everyone around this table is quite well aware of that. And Ms. Bray has met with David and I on a number of occasions and been a good resource for us. Our next delegate, Mark Baumann. He's going to talk to us about tree trimming. Welcome, Mark.
Mayor Shantz, council members, Woolwich staff members. It's a bit nostalgic for me to come back here. Normally I would be sitting where Bonnie is sitting, but that was my chair for 18 years. But I'm pleased to be here to speak to you tonight. During the time that I was a councillor, I was very passionate about the importance of planting trees. And more recently, I advocated for better tree maintenance on boulevards and in parks. During my last term, I had the nickname the Lorax. Trees and children have several things in common. When children are young, we hold toddlers' hands to help them learn to walk. When trees are young, we put stakes beside them to help them stand up. School-age children can be mischievous and test their boundaries. Young trees sprout branches and sometimes grow in the wrong direction. As children become teenagers, some will become rowdy and disruptive. Similarly, trees that have not been pruned for 12 to 15 years will have branches that poke residents or poke pedestrians and impede traffic. At this point, pruning trees becomes a reactive process by removing large branches with a chainsaw. For the past 4 years, I've been working part-time, helping out in the community, pruning trees in parks and along sidewalks and boulevards. I've probably pruned several thousand trees in Woolwich Township. I estimate that I've probably visited about 90% of the trees that are on boulevards and in parks. Presently, this work is funded from 2 different spots in the budget. I will use names rather than acronyms. I never did learn acronyms when I was a councillor. Both the roads department and the parks department have a tree maintenance line in their budget. The risk is that this is an easy place to cut and lower budgets. And I saw that happen when I was a councillor. It can get set aside. The roads department budget looks after maintenance for trees on roadsides and boulevards between sidewalks and streets. The parks budget looks after maintenance for trees in parks and along trails. The reality is all these trees are Woolwich trees. There's some places where you'd walk down a sidewalk and I could touch a roads tree here and a parks tree here at the same time, both looked after by 2 separate budgets. Both departments will still need to keep their respective budget lines to deal with trees that are damaged in storms or dead trees that need to be removed. My proposal is to have a new budget line in a separate location in the budget, and I'll defer to Richard Petherick to decide where that should be. That would proactively deal with pruning urban Woolwich trees. The initial budget amount could be used for staff time or for a contract position with an arborist. I would suggest this could be called the Proactive Urban Pruning Program, or PUP, another one of the acronyms that might take off. Regardless of how it's done, staff or contract, there needs to be a continuity in the program. Proactive pruning of trees is when they are young, and prune more frequently has many benefits. It is much more cost effective. There's less stress on the tree. It creates a much more attractive tree. The impacts on pedestrians and vehicles can preemptively be avoided. And the complaints, which some of you may have heard after my work this fall, about drastic reactive pruning will be reduced. So to give you a sort of a visual example, a proactive pruning is about the size of my thumb. Reactive is the size of my arm. And so when you picture a tree that has branches that are down too low, that are the size of an arm, you can imagine how much stress that puts on a tree. As Woolwich continues to grow with new subdivisions in Elmira, Breslau, and St. Jacobs coming online, the number of trees added to the tree inventory will increase every year. Young trees, I feel, should be pruned every 2 to 3 years until the small lower branches are removed to a height of at least 8 to 10 feet. This forces growth up and discourages horizontal branches from becoming future problems. The status quo method of reactive pruning is not sustainable, nor will it give us a healthy, beautiful canopy. I'm happy to mentor a staff person or relay what I've done in the past to help develop the new program. I'm also happy to answer any counselor or staff questions, and in your packages that you get, my phone number and email will be located there if you do want to contact me at some point in the future. I referred to the Lorax earlier. Probably none of you have thought of Dr. Zeus as an environmentalist, but I will quote a little bit from Dr. Zeus. I am the Lorax. I speak for the trees. I speak for the trees, for the trees have no tongues. And I'm asking you all at the top of my lungs. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bauman. Questions? I don't see any. Oh,
Yep.
we do have Councillor Schwinn.
Yeah, thanks. I'm not sure. Excuse me. Not sure this is for Mr. Bauman or for staff. What percentage of the trees are being pruned now? Is it a 5-year process, not being done at all process? And what percentage would you be doing yourself, Mr. Bauman, compared to staff?
I can start a little bit by saying, basically the trees that I've done in the last 4 years, I've covered most of the township. An example of what I did this year for the roads department, they received an email from the snow plowing maintenance company that does the sidewalks. And it had 3 pages of addresses and things that needed to be done where their machines were hitting the trees. So it was impacting their snow sidewalk clearing, and obviously then impacting pedestrians as well. That took me about 175 hours to go through that page just in Elmira here. So that gives you a bit of an idea. In addition to that, staff also came along with their chipper and picked up the branches that I left, because I said I was sick and tired of loading branches into my truck and hauling them somewhere else. It's a lot easier to do, or more effective as well, to do it running them through a chipper. So, but yeah, it's, as I said, I've been through most of the township, but if it's neglected now, we'll soon be back to, you as a farmer would know that trees keep growing. They don't take a break. So
What would you, so you feel like the township's in pretty good shape right now? From the work
if this
that you've
program
done?
continues,
If
we are in
we-
good shape. I would say there's still going to be some reactive pruning that happens all the time. There's always branches that grow out over the street and you need a long handled chainsaw to get them. But if we get a person on board from staff or an arborist under a contract position who can methodically go through the township and on a 2 to 3 year program, younger trees need more attention, but it's not near as much. I think you can keep things going and keep things under control. And it's surprising how much difference it makes in a neighborhood when trees are pruned, how they look than what they looked like before I started here at Elmira.
Yeah. When you and I talked in the summertime, when you were showing me some of the trees that you had pruned, I think you were able to give me a sort of an estimate of what you thought it would take to manage the tree pruning if we did it annually. Did you do that, and can you do that?
I don't want to throw numbers at it to predetermine what staff. I have talked with both Thomas and Jared Pepe, and so I don't want to presuppose what they would propose as well, but I bounced my ideas off of them, and I think they're on board with the concept. So
okay, we'll ask them.
Yep.
Super. Thank you so
Okay,
much.
Thank you for your time.
Okay, our next delegate is Ms. Inga Rennie. Township of Woolwich Environmental Enhancement Committee Roadside Tree Planting Initiative Approval and Funding Request. Welcome, Inga. It's good
Good
to see
evening,
you.
your worship, council members. I am going to ask the council's indulgence. I could not get this down below 8 minutes. I know I have 7, but this is a big project.
Council, are you in favor of giving Inga extra time? Yeah. You need a couple minutes?
I'll keep it short. Okay.
Do your best.
Yes. You've all received the summary of the Bring Back the Maples initiative to plant 21,000 trees on the township roads over the next 3 years. For the last 11 years, Trees for Woolwich has been focused on increasing the canopy cover in Woolwich and we've undertaken increasingly challenging and impactful programs from park plantings to reforestation, culminating in the 65-acre nature reserve that we have created, which, as an aside, received an Ontario Landscape Design Excellence Award this week, together with a green certificate for its sustainability. So in recent years, though, the impact of climate change has made our task somewhat more urgent. And I want to set out tonight our most ambitious project yet to show you the impact that it will make and to tell you why $50,000 is money well spent. How many reasons can you think of why we might want our rural roads to look like this? Oops. Shortly, you'll see a photo of the trees that were planted on Lundy Road by Tweak in 2006, 16 years ago, in 2006. The research shows that for majority of people, roadside trees are the primary element of highway scenic beauty. It also contributes to a reduction in traffic speed where there are roadside trees and increased pedestrian use. Perhaps you recognize the loss of the large old maples that used to line our roads. These trees are a legacy dating back to 1883, when the Ontario legislature subsidized municipalities to pay farmers 25 cents for every roadside tree they planted that survived for 5 years. The maple trees that lined our roads that we've enjoyed were the result of the foresight and wisdom of both the farmers and the legislators over 100 years ago. We've called our project Bring Back the Maples to recognize that foresight and wisdom needs to be renewed. Maybe your thoughts go to the cultural impact that maple-lined roads could have to support the world's largest maple syrup festival. Or perhaps to create the wildlife corridors that would support declining bird and insect populations. But maybe your focus is on the more urgent, hardcore environmental benefits that come from these tree plantings. The township has made commitments to do its part to address climate change challenge. And over the 80-year time frame, here is what these trees will accomplish for us. They will capture 90,000 tons of carbon dioxide. To put that into context, the township calculated CO2 emissions from their operations in 2017 at about 2,000 tons annually. The 80-year CO2 capture by this roadside tree project is the equivalent of 48 years of township emissions. To look at it another way, 80-year carbon capture for these roadside trees is the equivalent of taking 244 cars off the road every year for 80 years. The planting will divert 600,000 cubic meters of stormwater, that's 240 Olympic-sized swimming pools, from running off into the ditches and reducing both erosion and flooding. The trees will also absorb 312,000 kilograms of airborne pollutants, ozone, carbon monoxide, carbon dioxide, and intercept micron level particulate matter like smoke and ash, and will lower roadside temperatures. In the words of the ecologist Douglas Talamy, in the past, we've asked one thing of our gardens, that they be pretty. Now we ask them to support life, sequester carbon, feed pollinators, and manage water. The good news is that they're capable of all of that. This project supports the goals of the 2018 Elmira Green Infrastructure Report, one of which was to increase the canopy cover for the township. Canopy cover in the township stands at about 14%, and 30% is considered ideal. While council supported the report, there was never a specific plan to get to the goal of a 30% tree cover in Elmira. We've been working on it, but this program makes a very significant contribution to that tree cover, and would be a tremendous boost to Woolwich's environmental credentials. It would certainly put us on the map. Whatever the reasons that might speak to you about how to get this done, for us, the question is how. We have 335 kilometers of rural roads in Woolwich. That's available public land. We can build our own highly visible linear park and wildlife corridor, increase the canopy and the carbon capture. What we needed is a plan that has a high survival rate, is cost effective, and can be accomplished soon. Under our plan, installation, watering, and pruning for the first 7 years will be completed by Earthscape's 2-person crew led by Mark Schwartz, using Earthscape equipment. Some auxiliary work will be done by our experienced volunteers, including a lot of the landowner contact. Earthscape's generosity, lots of community volunteer work, has got our cost per tree down to $15 per tree. Trees for Woolwich will use plug-sized trees, planting in the spring and fall. Survival of the plugs is predicted at 75 to 85%, which is considerably higher than the caliper trees that are currently being installed by the region and the township. Tree species are selected based on landscape conditions, including the presence of power lines, soil type, moisture, and shade. The majority of the trees will be sugar maple, red maple, bur oak, and walnut and crabapple. There will be others, but Trees for Woolwich has been talking to infrastructure services since April to ascertain requirements for roadside tree plantings and to look at viable sites. 4 pilot projects that we did, 473 trees, provided detailed costs on installation, labor, and watering. And after we evaluated our methods, our first plan used larger trees, came in at $50 per tree, and took 10 years to complete. We decided we had to do better. We are using smaller trees to allow us to plant both effectively, safely, and efficiently, and to maximize survival and minimize watering requirements. At $15 a tree for the installation, the tree guard, a stake, a cocoa mat, and watering, this plan is incredibly cost effective. Just by comparison, when the township plants a boulevard tree, which is admittedly larger, it comes in at $400 a tree. Other jurisdictions in similar climates, Clarington Township have successfully used this size of tree and installation method for large-scale roadside plantings. The funding requirements for this project are $110,000 a year over for 3 years. Our plan is that will be provided by corporate donors, by the township, the region, some private donors, and some reforestation programs. We're asking the township to fund $50,000 a year over 3 years. In the words of the 2018 Elmira Green Infrastructure Report, trees are the only infrastructure that appreciates over time. That's my submission. I'm happy to answer any.
Right on time. Thank you. Are there questions? Councillor Cadeau.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor, excuse me, to the delegate. At the completion of this project, are you able to give a projection of what the tree canopy coverage would be?
We haven't, we could do that calculation for you. It's always, when we started to try and increase the tree canopy cover, the emerald ash borer came along. So all of a sudden, we were lucky if we were breaking even because we were furiously losing trees. So we haven't done a precise calculation, but there's no question it would be a very significant increase in the tree cover. One of our problems is that because we have good agricultural land, nobody wants to plant up good agricultural land into trees. So we're scrounging for where we can do this. And the roadsides are the logical spot.
Councillor Bryant.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Mayor, to Inga. How tall are these trees and how big around are they? I mean, you've given us a size, but it's visualizing what we're looking at.
Okay. This is the device that plants them. These are trees will be in the range of about 1 foot to 1.5 feet.
Okay.
They get dropped in the top here. This gets inserted in the ground, get dropped into the top. Tree is there. That the planting is the least of it.
Okay.
Then they are protected with these tree guards. They protect, they also accelerate the growth of the tree because it's because of the protection. There's a stake and then there's a cocoa mat to protect it.
Okay.
So they're quite small. The amazing thing is that the research indicates that after 5 years, you won't see the size of those trees will be roughly the same as the larger trees that we've been planting.
Okay. So is there any risk of them being cut off with the roadside equipment, cutting weeds and ditches and whatnot?
No greater risk than any other tree, particularly with the stake and the guard. It makes it pretty hard to say, oops, I didn't see it.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, we're looking at planting 2 feet in from the property line. So if we're dealing with a farm field, they shouldn't be out onto township property.
Councillor Cadeau.
Thank you. Through you. This is probably a silly question. I think I know the answer. I just want to make sure. Cost per tree, $13, including watering.
We're up to 15 by now, but yeah.
So including watering and pruning at years 3 and 7, you're watering throughout the duration. You're not just watering.
We're watering as needed.
Okay.
Generally speaking, you only water trees for 2 years in any event. And because of the smaller the tree, the less watering they need, which is one of the reasons, frankly, we've gone to smaller trees, because the watering is incredibly time consuming and it's difficult to do on roadsides. So the small trees, and you plant at the right time of year too. So you plant in the wet season in the spring and in the wet season in the fall. So we're looking to minimize the amount of watering that's needed.
Anyone else? Okay. Thank you for the presentation and thank you on behalf of the Lorax for increasing our tree canopy. I think trees are very important to the environment, and you and your committee have done great work in that regard. So thank you.
Thank you. They're the answer to some of the climate reduction, the emission reductions goals that the township is committed to. So
For sure.
thank you.
Thank you. Okay. I think our final delegate is Barbara Schumacher, sorry, member of the 50 by 30 Waterloo Region Budgeting Through a Climate Lens. Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor, councillors. I am a resident of Woolwich and a member of 50 by 30 WR, and I had the pleasure of speaking with many of you and 30 other electoral candidates in our 8 municipalities during the run-up to the recent election. I bring a message of encouragement. A Facebook friend who lives in Maberly, Ontario, posted on January the 3rd, quote, "Yesterday, I was out for the second day in a row cleaning up after the May 21st Directco. We had 3 huge 16-inch diameter scaffolds fall from our maple trees and decided to wait until now to deal with them. As an aside, there is almost no snow on the ground. Climate change is dramatically altering our seasons. With my mask, I'm having a hard time trying to speak fast enough to do my report. I'm sorry, I intended to do this remotely, but I didn't get the link. So I drove in quick so I could be here. So I'm
Okay.
just hoping I could slow down.
Just slow down and relax. We'll,
Thank you.
We'll let you have the time you need.
Thank you so much. So when I read this Facebook post from my friend, my mind flashed back to my drive along Highway 7 at the time of the Directco. And I was going through the most devastation for miles and miles. Where dense forests once stood, tree trunks were snapped like matchsticks. In Norwood and Uxbridge, detours wound around old growth trees uprooted, ripping concrete sidewalks and asphalt from the streets. At the same time, 14 active forest fires were raging in northeastern Ontario and threatening communities. I remember the flooding along the Ottawa River in 2019, declared bigger than the 2017 event that was considered the flood of the century. While I recall evidence of climate change in Ontario, we hear about disasters across Canada and around the world. Atmospheric rivers in BC and California, tornadoes in the US, Hurricane Fiona sweeping PEI beaches and Newfoundland villages into the sea. Droughts making farming impossible in Africa and the Canadian prairies. Infernos in Australia, California, and BC. Unimaginable fires in the Arctic and Siberia. Floods in India and Pakistan. On and on, unending chaos. How is it that our provincial government is ignoring its responsibility to keep us safe? Yes, housing is unaffordable, and we must find solutions to homelessness. But in what universe does it make sense to pass legislation which will exacerbate global heating, escalate climate chaos, destroy lives, infrastructure, jobs, and homes, and increase the financial burden on citizens? On January 5th, the Canadian Press reported The Insurance Bureau of Canada is estimating insured damages from Hurricane Fiona will now reach $800 million, making Hurricane Fiona the 7th costliest extreme weather event in Canada's history and the most costly in Atlantic Canada. Insurance companies are refusing to insure properties from flooding. Rebuilding Lytton, BC is still in the planning stages. This, climate scientists tell us, is just the beginning. We must gird ourselves for far worse if we do not act immediately and swiftly. So with the burden of action resting on your shoulders, I want to deliver a message of support to you today, to reassure you that Ontario's community of environmental climate activists understand the challenges that Bill 23 and related regulations pose for municipal councils. We encourage you to keep focused on your goal of reducing GHG emissions 50% by 2030. This is just 7 years. This means every decision you make must be taken through a climate action lens. With effectively gagging the Grand River Conservation Authority and removing the coordinating and planning function of regional government, this provincial government leaves you no option but to seek the expertise from other sources that is critical to evaluate development proposals regarding protections for groundwater, prevention of flooding, and preservation of natural heritage and farmland. To accomplish this, endorse the proposal to hire a new position dedicated to climate action. Use the upcoming Rural Ontario Municipal Association Conference as an opportunity to be creative and collaborative with other municipalities who are seeking solutions to the many Bill 23 challenges. What we have learned about the lobbying for Bill 23 reveals that we can't trust developers to provide an unbiased assessment. We citizens are engaged, informing ourselves, exploring how we may be able to bring some of the expertise you need, research from our post-secondary institutions, experts in the private sector, public education to raise awareness, and support for the work that you do to strengthen our common life. In conclusion, please hear my message that urgent climate action must go forward. During your consideration of the budget, plan to spend what is necessary to achieve a safe, resilient, sustainable future for our communities, our families, and our children. We have the evidence now that money spent on climate adaptation and mitigation will be far less than the financial burdens of more climate chaos, not to mention the incalculable loss of human life. Thank you for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you. And you made it pretty much in the 5 minutes anyway.
Oh,
So
Thank you.
are there any questions for Ms. Schumacher? No. Councillor Cadeau.
Thanks, through you, Mayor. Not necessarily to Ms. Schumacher, but maybe to staff. I've been mulling over this question as we are doing our budget deliberations, and I think it's probably a relevant time to bring it up now while we have 30 by 50, 50 by 30 really delegating to us. So I suppose to you, David, how is this budget in its current form really propelling us towards this goal of 50 by 30? And I guess it's kind of an unfair question to ask because we're going over the budget and maybe we can kind of highlight it on a case by case basis. But I'm just wondering if we can point to anything very specifically high level that we can say, hey, this has moved us along this direction by X amount. Are we tracking that? Do we know where we're at in trying to get to 50 by 30?
I'm going to let David answer that, but before I do that, are there any questions for Ms. Schumacher? I'm going to let her sit down if, if there aren't.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, so first off, I would say that yeah, you know, because you know, we got a heads up that, you know, this issue would be coming up tonight. Staff will be addressing some of this in terms of their presentation. However, you know, just for the benefit right now, I would reflect high level on the following, that prior to this budget year and for quite a number of years, within the recreation and community services area, we had been budgeting $50,000 a year for improvements that would fit into the climate change sustainability side of things. A good example of that is over time, there's been a staged program of replacing all of the lighting systems to create more energy efficiency throughout our rec complex and all of our buildings. As well, right across the region, there was a collaborative effort between the cities and the area municipalities to replace all of the streetlights, maybe save and except for some of the decorative lighting that still has to be done, or some of the older fashioned lighting that needs to be done. Have we tracked that? Unfortunately, no. The only tracking that we've done as an organization through our green team is prior to the 80 by 50 to 50 by 30, through our Sustainable Waterloo Region membership, we were required a number of years ago to set a goal, at least for the corporation, to start. And that goal was to hit 20% by 2027. Well, we hit that within a few years of doing things, and we continue to track that progress, but obviously that's not good enough. If we're going to move the dial, we need to be way more aggressive. But you know, as I said, we have not tracked the other impact of all of the various sustainability moves that we have done. But staff will be speaking to some of this later. More specifically, you know, with the introduction of a greening levy a number of years ago, and the move towards the start to purchase and replace some of our fleet, we certainly are going to have to start to do that so that we can demonstrate how well we're doing relative to our support, not only for the Transform Waterloo Region strategy, but also the 50 by 2030. So that's the best, unfortunately, I can do for right now.
Follow-up comment, I suppose, to council. Something for us to consider, I think, moving forward, as we heard delegates talk to us about the potential addition of a manager that could potentially oversee something like it is we're talking about right now. How can we monitor so that we're actually making meaningful, we're actually meeting some of these goals in a meaningful way? I think it's disingenuous to kind of sit here and say, yeah, we're absolutely going to meet targets 100% of the time. I don't know that we're there, but we need to be showing progress if this is something that we as a township have signed on for. So something for us to be considering as we continue to have these discussions throughout tonight.
Thank you. We're not really debating this right now, but it is budget and is a little bit different than in regular meetings. So if anyone else has anything else to add before we move on, we'll get into this again later. Okay. Thank you. And thank you to our delegates. You're welcome to stay or go as you feel comfortable and listen to the rest of the meeting. Oh. You know that David's a Habs fan. Yeah, that's yeah.
That was a dig on the way out.
Yeah. Well, we're just going to take a minute for everyone to get reorganized here. Yes. Yeah. Okay. Are we ready?
All good.
The joy of technology. Sometimes it takes a while. Since we're waiting on the topic of environmental, I think to Councillor Cadeau's comment, I think that's something that we need to also keep in mind in all the areas, right? What can we do in planning to, to be environmentally conscious? What can we do in engineering to be environmentally conscious? As well as rec, who I think are ready to go now. And I will call on Acting Director of Recreation and Community Services, Thomas Vanderhoff, and Manager of Recreation, Jen Horndl.
Thank you, Mayor Shantz. We also have Annie with us as well, joining remotely, our Director of Recreation and Community Services.
Annie, welcome. It's good to see you. I can't see you, but we're glad you're here.
We will share, I'll share through our environmental section as well too, some of the additional works that we've been doing over the last couple of years when we get there. So Jen is going to run the slide. So yeah, so welcome. Thanks for this. Monday was exciting and we're happy to be here second time around. So I'm sure next week will be more exciting. Reflecting on 2022 for Recreation and Community Services, the year started with the lingering impacts from the pandemic. January was a tough month for us with the closure of some of our facilities. And moving through 2022, best efforts to return to somewhat of normal operations. The operating budget for 2023 remains fairly status quo for the department, with limited enhancements to the tune of a 3% increase overall in our expenses and no change in revenues, as I mentioned, as we continue to rebuild and try and get back to a normal. Council will have noticed a few accounting changes related to the locations of budgets, such as staffing, which have not had an overall impact on the expenditures, and we'll touch on that shortly. Of note, staff have also carried forward COVID relief funding to the tune of 133,000, I believe. Yes, 133,000. As we continue to mitigate, building revenues up with our pool and specifically our fitness center as well. Staff, lastly, on the operating side, staff did also propose the addition of 2 positions early on through the budget process, which were later removed as we went through various drafts. These included the increase of an existing part-time departmental administrative assistant position to full-time. And that position is one that is shared with fire services. And then also the addition of a sustainability coordinator position as well. And then finally, I'm going to touch on the capital budget, which is reflective of both renewal projects as well as new projects. Yes. Okay, so moving on to operating. Go to the next slide, please, Jen. So operating contains the following departmental areas, just run through this for the public as well that's watching: the cemeteries, parks and trails / environmental, community centers, Woolwich Memorial Center and the St. Jacobs Arena, libraries, the administration building and other facilities. And like I asked, I'll touch on just some of the legislation that kind of mandates the work we do through the Ontario Building Code, Ontario Fire Code, AODA legislation, Ministry of Environment, Ministry of Energy, and then TSSA is a large one for us as well too, with regards to the rinks and our boiler systems, that sort of thing. Next slide, please. So I'm going to walk through each departmental area just from a high level, just highlight some of the changes for council, some of the changes that you would have seen in the notes through the budget. So cemeteries, the township is in the process of assuming St. James Cemetery and related expenditures there with regards to turf maintenance, snow removal, and then all other interment related expenses as well. Staff have proposed minor capital purchases for the new cemetery, some seating, waste receptacles, that sort of thing, along with a new sign. And then staff have also proposed for the replacement of the shed that we have across the street at Union Cemetery, which no longer meets the needs for the department from an equipment storage perspective. And we would look to either repurpose or either sell the existing shed that's there to try and recoup some costs as well. General administration, staff have carried forward the $133,000 in COVID relief funding that I spoke to earlier. Minor capital purchases in this area include equipment, and staff have proposed purchases to better enhance our parks and sports fields maintenance. And then lastly, staff have added a new GL for 2023 to capture all unionized salaries, which were previously dispersed throughout the budget. Community centers, parks, arenas, cemeteries, and then all of our other buildings. So staff complement is consistent in 2023 as it was in 2022 with 11 facility attendants, so no addition there. And aside from accommodating negotiated cost of living adjustments, there are no financial changes as a result of this. The consolidation is really for transparency purposes for council and also for staff to take a good look at staffing wages this year to see how we are allocating those wages and try and come up with a better solution. Currently, as staff move throughout the township, whether that's emptying garbages at facilities or doing facility inspections, every time they hit that facility, they put in 15 minutes, a half hour of time for every location that they go to. Next, moving on to St. Jacobs Arena. So changes from 2022 include additional part-time staffing at the facility at the request of our users, and both for operations and health and safety reasons. Also, staff can highlight through this budget the 33.5% subsidy expenditure that you will see for our affiliated minor hockey organizations. This is located in both the St. Jacobs budget as well as the Woolwich Memorial Center. And that's just to show council that was the request of past councils to have those as separate line items as an expenditure. The Woolwich Memorial Center, very limited changes in this budget for 2023. Minor capital purchases include some of the larger building repairs, noise abatement to accommodate the affordable housing development to the north of the WMC, and to ensure that the building is in compliance with the Ministry of Environment. And then onto the parks area. So staff have proposed the addition of 2 summer temporary staff to focus on the horticulture area. This is an area that we've been deficient on in recent years and are trying to play a little bit of catch up here. As we take on new parkland, we often take on new gardens, we take on new trees. So this position is focused in those areas, also tree care. So mulching of trees, installing tree guards, that sort of thing. Also of note, with the changing roles of our existing settlement recreation centers from a more operations focus to more of a fundraising focus and event hosting focus, we have transitioned the revenues for parks and sports fields, so ball diamond soccer fields, from the community centers themselves to the parks budget to be more reflective of where they should be really in the budget. And they were with the community centers because that's at one point in time, those were revenues that the recreation associations used to operate their facilities. And then lastly, similar year over year under parks, minor capital, we've got a number of minor capital projects here. These projects all fall under the $25,000 threshold, and that's why we have them located here in the budget. Projects include replacement of the washroom roof at Snyder Park, installation of a dugout at Lions Park, which has been a request of our user groups for the last few years, repairs to the band shell at Gore Park, and carrying forward of $50,000 to assist in completion of the Parks Master Plan, which is now a requirement of new planning legislation. Staff have been working on that over the last year, but we haven't spent out those dollars on any consulting assistance, and we're looking to do that in 2023 in conjunction with development services as well too. They are helping us out now just with regards to the urgency and need for us to have that done in short order. Okay, next slide. The trails and environmental area. I guess I can start with just some of the some of the initiatives that we've implemented over the last few years. So from a kind of corporate perspective, we have our green team, which is made up of staff from various departments, and that has been the team that has approved spending of the climate action greening reserve funding. They also host events. We do tree planting events. We do a cleanup in the spring. We have our climate action events, which is what Ann Roberts, our environmental coordinator, has been doing with Sandra Bray, meeting every week, putting on events. And there is a whole host planned, as David has alluded to, that is absolutely wonderful. And there's been great turnout at those events as well. Tree giveaways. We've been doing tree giveaways the last 2 years out of the WMC, which have been a huge success. And it seems like they're picking up steam, and we're looking to do more trees next year. And then the feasibility study that you will see in the capital budget as well too, and I'll speak to that, but that's going to provide staff some direction on what we need to do in our facilities to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. From a boots on the ground perspective and project perspective, tree planting, the township, the Parks Department is currently spending $20,000 a year annually on planting throughout our parks. We have provided support to Tweak and Trees for Woolwich over the last number of years, and more so in 2022 and proposed for 2023 with regards to special projects. We have done LED retrofits at a number of our buildings and sports fields. We have purchased electric parks equipment just last year. So all new string trimmers and blowers, that's what staff are using now in our parks moving forward. Building upgrades. So simple building upgrades. You would have seen Conestoga Works here today. I'm not sure if everyone got there, but just that building alone, that building is over 100 years old. And in recent years, we insulated the building, replaced windows, replaced doors, replaced cladding, that sort of thing. So just doing some of those needed upgrades. And then EV charging stations as well too. We'll find that, and we'll discuss that later on through this presentation. So back to the presentation. So the trails and environmental area. So for 2023, this budget remains fairly status quo. Aside from additional one-time funding allocated to Tweak and Trees for Woolwich to support specific projects for them. So Tweak has been allocated their standard 14,500, which is housed under the Tweak line. So everything over that $14,500 as an expense comes from donations. So that's offset through the revenue side on that budget. So 14.5 of that is from the township. In addition to this funding, staff have also allocated 40,000 under the greening line, which is funded from the Climate Action Green Infrastructure Reserve Fund. And this is to support 5,000. Actually, give me 1 second so I can make sure I'm on track here. 5,000 for additional support for tree watering, 10,000 for additional Elmira Nature Reserve support, so tree planting at the Elmira Nature Reserve, and then $25,000 in additional support for the Trees for Woolwich rural roadside planting project, which Inga spoke to earlier. So total funding for Tweak from the township in 2023 is $54,500. We have not met the ask that Tweak has requested at $52,000 from the township for that, specifically for the rural roadside project. We have currently allocated $25,000 for that project. Simply put, that's what's remaining in the Climate Action Greening Infrastructure Reserve Fund to allocate to that specific project, unless council so wishes to move some funds around, defer projects, that sort of thing. So I'd like to speak to the sustainability coordinator position. So as previously mentioned, staff had allocated sufficient funding to the tune of approximately 100,000, which includes all other areas, that WSAB benefits, that sort of thing. This was removed through the budget process. This position was intended to carry out all corporate environmental related initiative work to allow for Woolwich to work towards achieving its GHG reduction targets. This position would work with development services, infrastructure services, RCS, among others, to carry out the implementation of the council supported 45 Transform Waterloo strategy initiatives. Currently, this work is being completed by our environmental coordinator, whom previously just focused on trails and volunteer stewardship. So previous council did not support the use of Climate Action Green Infrastructure Reserve Fund to fund staff expenses. However, staff are proposing this as an option for 2023 for council to consider. This reserve is fully allocated at the moment. However, staff currently have grant applications out for both the EV charging project as well as the feasibility study. And pending success, funds could be available and used to fund this position from that reserve. Additionally, by the time a staff person is onboarded, we could be looking at roughly $40,000 to $50,000 to fund that position. So that is an option for council to consider. We could wait until to see if we're successful with grant applications. We could defer a project, that sort of thing. But just wanted to put that out there for council. Next, moving on to community centers. So the only major change for 2023 in the community centers budget is the loss of our permanent tenant at the BCC. Which was roughly $23,000 annually in revenue. Staff are currently working with the region of Waterloo, however, and will be carrying out public consultation process in the coming months with an aim at enhancing library services in Breslau and looking to use the space that the existing tenant was in at the facility. That finishes operating, so we will move on to capital. You can skip right to the next one, Jen, please. So equipment purchases for 2023 include both replacements and new vehicle purchases. The department has 2 pickup trucks that are due for replacement at our 10-year life cycle replacement. Additionally, staff have included a half-ton plow truck, a specialized watering trailer, and a mower. So the department always has had a plow truck typically for use at the WMC and other sites when necessary during significant snow events. Due to operational needs, as determined by past staff, our existing plow truck was replaced with a different style truck. So we would like to equip ourselves with a plow truck again. The specialized watering trailer would house a 550-gallon water tank, which is that would double the size of what we currently have, and it would allow the department to continue with greening efforts throughout our parks. As Inga mentioned, watering is a serious, time-consuming. The efforts are significant for staff, and we're currently watering roughly 2 days a week. This would allow us to increase to approximately 3 to 3.5 days a week with this new piece of equipment. And then lastly, purchase of our 3rd commercial mower will allow us to continue to build our capacity to maintain township turf and specifically better maintain our sports fields while continuing to offset the work with contracted maintenance. The township currently maintains approximately 1/3 of our township turf, or 50 acres, with the focus being on our premier parks and sports fields. And through the purchase of this mower, we would be able to take on all of our soccer fields from previously contracted services to allow us to meet the needs of our users there. And that's an area that we see that's a frequent service level that maybe isn't met through the summer at some of our fields. And we would be looking to purchase a used mower with these funds. Off lease, low hour mowers are available in the market for us to purchase. Next slide, please. Property maintenance, electric vehicle charging stations. So staff are looking to install 2 public charging stations, which would service 4 vehicles at the public parking lot on Water Street in St. Jacobs, along with 1 station at the administration building to support the purchase of 2 electric vehicles by our building department to allow for us to continue to transition our fleet to electric. We see this as an opportunity. Our building department would use passenger vehicles versus our work yards, which use bigger pickup trucks, that sort of thing. And we understand that there are electric vehicles available for pickup trucks, but the charging infrastructure is a challenge for us right now. And the opportunity is here for the building department. Climate Action Initiatives feasibility study. So this project was pre-approved by the existing council in 2022 and entails analysis of our building energy and GHG emissions at our major facilities, including the arenas, administration building, BCC, St. Jacobs Fire Station. The work is being completed by Simcoe and Enviro Stewards. Enviro Stewards is a local company here in Elmira with an engineering focus, and they will be reviewing the facilities and providing us with life cycle costs, implementation timelines, and budget for replacements to allow us to meet our greenhouse gas emissions targets. Next, the Woolwich Memorial Center plant and dehumidifier replacement. This project was awarded by council in 2022 to Simcoe at a total cost of 2.2 million and is underway with construction to occur during the summer months. It includes replacement of the refrigeration system at the WMC and pool dehumidifier and was spurred due to continued health and safety concerns and budget concerns, ongoing budget concerns. Nearly 1.5 in grant funding through the Investing in Canada Infrastructure Program will support this project. Union Street parking lot. So this project is being carried over from 2021 and was deferred due to delays in removal of our fuel tanks at the works yard from the region. So the existing parking lot has 10 spaces. You probably may have seen how many staff we have at the works yard today. 10 spaces does not cut it. So we have staff parking on the vehicles, parking at other yards, that sort of thing. So we're looking to add, it'll be 23 spaces total at the works yard. Union Cemetery laneway paving. This project was on the forecast. We have bumped it up a couple of years just due to the condition of the laneway at Union Cemetery. The BCC generator, we are anticipating that to come in the next couple of weeks. So that's a good project that will wrap up in the first quarter, and that will allow for that facility to act more appropriately as an emergency operations center. Accessibility audit. So as January 2025 deadline looms for compliance with AODA legislation, staff are looking to have an updated accessibility audit completed at our facilities to assist in driving capital projects through 2024 and likely beyond that as well. And then lastly, 22 Mockingbird demolition and parking addition. So in June of 2022, council approved the acquisition of the property at 22 Mockingbird located in Park Manor and directed staff to report back on the use of the site through 2023 budget deliberations. Region Waterloo staff are currently planning to take a report before their council in March to officially declare the property as surplus. And staff had originally discussed the potential for storage at this site as for the Recreation and Community Services Department. However, following much discussion and provided that the township is currently undergoing an environmental assessment for a consolidated operations facility, staff felt that it was best to wait for that process to finish and look for some direction from council there on the storage side for equipment. Park Manor is the main hub for Woolwich youth soccer. It's got 5 soccer pitches, and we have reached out to them as well to discuss options for the site. And we are looking to have a blend between additional parking. There's extremely limited parking at that facility. There's 10 parking spaces that are dedicated for soccer, and then also add some additional, revert some of the existing building back to parkland as well. And with that, happy to take any questions that council may have.
Thank you. Who wants to start? Councillor Bryant.
Thank you, Mayor Shantz. I have a few questions, actually. I'm going to start with the first one being on page 1 of the paper copy. I don't know what number that is on the electronic, but you have a budget line for general administration. Last year was 1.142 million. This year, the final number with adjustments, 2.2 million. Can you explain that one to me, please? I'm a little lost on that.
Yeah, through you, Mayor Shantz, Councillor Bryant. So that is the result of the transition of all of the unionized wages from all the various areas, arenas, parks, community centers, and they've been consolidated and put under general administration.
So in 2022, they were kept separate. Is
So
that
they
like
were-
the big difference?
Yeah, they were littered throughout the budget. And I can confirm that there's no financial impact, no increase in staff aside from the approved costs of living adjustments.
Okay. Then my second question is to do with the libraries. You're looking to do an $8,000 brick repair. Which library is that to?
So a building condition, sorry, through your Shantz to Council Brian, a recent building condition assessment of the Elmira Library has determined that some repairs are needed to the brickwork.
Okay, and then my final question relates to, there was an email I received from a constituent in Breslau with a whole list of questions. Can you address these questions for me, please? And it'll give answers to the gentleman as well. I think there was 11 points on his email.
Yep, absolutely. You'd like me to just go through them one by
Yeah,
one?
you can go one
Okay.
by one, because then I'm sure he's probably going to be watching this, so he'll get the answers. It'll just save a lot of back and forth.
Okay,
Thank
absolutely.
you.
Okay.
Through your Mayor Shantz to Councillor Bryant. So the first question, just for the public that's listening as well too, the 5-year plan shows 1.5 million spent in Elmira and $500,000 spent in Breslau, and why? So currently, there's a number of different reasons for this. Currently, we have 2 parks in Breslau and we have a total of 17 in Elmira. Spending in Breslau is allocated in the 5-year forecast, as you can see on the latter half for some projects. We will be taking on some parkland the next 2 to 5 years. It's always a bit of a question mark on when that parkland will come live with us. In the last couple of years in Breslau, I believe 2021, we spent $50,000 on the tennis courts in Breslau Memorial Park, as well as replaced the playground in Hopewell Heights at a cost of $85,000. And then there's also, from a high level, there's factors that are involved in what gets replaced, whether it's replacement of existing assets that we already have. Obviously, we have a handful more assets in Elmira versus Breslau, just due to the number of parks, that sort of thing. This second, just feel free to jump in as
No,
well.
it's
too.
okay.
You can
I just want
expand
the
on
answers, that's all.
The second question, only in 2023 budget does it show demo of the Breslau Memorial Park Fieldhouse. It was not in the 5-year plan last year. Why? So this project was brought forward on the 5-year forecast. It has been on the minds of staff. So we brought it onto the 5-year forecast and we didn't bring it in on the 5th year. I think we brought it in on the 3rd year, just due to the condition of the property, ongoing vandalism at the site, limited use. It hasn't been used for the last 13 years. The plumbing was serviced by a decommissioned well. And also there was question with regards to washroom availability in Breslau Memorial Park. With the addition of the Breslau Community Center, the washrooms are open for the majority of the week at the community center, so they are accessible there. Staff are looking to replace it to still allow for some storage space for our outdoor rink volunteers, and it would house all the electrical that's there for the baseball diamonds as well. I think those are all the notes I have there. Yeah, for the most part.
The washroom upgrades to the existing
Yes.
Elmira parks.
So the OTF funding that was secured for, I believe this is in reference to Bolander, was OTF funding that was secured by a third party. The township is not able, aside from the odd occurrence, one was through the pandemic, OTF grants were opened up to municipalities of our size, and we were able to do a project at Lions Park. Aside from that, OTF grants are typically reserved for not-profits, that sort of thing. We're not able to apply from them any longer, as we have a population that's over 25,000, which is typically the threshold. Yeah, and the new washroom in Gibson Park as well too is one that was primarily funded by a fundraiser as well, and with the secure grant funding. So the third one, there's not a line item to specifically state what the operational expenses are for the Elmira splash pad budget. Please ask for the item. So the operating and maintenance expenses for the Bolander Park splash pad are included in our parks budget, the water lines, as well as our parks maintenance line, as well as our service contracts line, depending on what the work is. Splash pad use, water use has been up and down through the pandemic and after the pandemic. What do I have my notes here? We're approximately $15,000 annually for that water use. We saw 2021, even during the pandemic, parks opened up. We saw probably one of the highest years in water usage that we've seen. 2022 wasn't as bad. We've done some rejigging and reprogramming of the splash pad as well too, to get that number to a reasonable level. Approximately $15,000 annually for water and service, $3,500 for opening and closing. And then again, that's housed in a number of GLs within the parks budget. So one Elmira item was moved from 2024 to 2023, and the budget doubled from 40 to 80K. So this was with regards to the Bolander Park playground surface replacement. I'll speak to this, or I may have missed this actually through.
The park stuff.
Did I miss all of the park stuff?
Yeah, I was like.
Oh,
looking at-
my
Okay.
apologies. I will, once we're done here, I will hop back and walk through those. So this is a replacement of the playground surfacing. It was installed approximately 5 years ago. It's been a bit of a disappointment for staff. It has broken away. It's been difficulty to get the contractor back to even service it. $40,000, $80,000 is a result of us going out and getting official quotes. And then also, which I'll speak to after, we wanted to present council, there is an option to not go with the same surfacing and reduce that expense to $40,000, but I'll touch on that after. Okay, fifth question here. So many items for Bolander parking lot paving as well as other Elmira parks. Can this not be pushed off? Some of it is replacement of assets that are due for replacement. This parking lot is a good example of jumping on economies of scale. The region will be replacing Church Street, and they are going to be putting the work at the washroom all under that contract as well too.
He wants the Breslau Parks advanced. Can that be addressed too, please? That's the second part of part.
Yeah, so I guess that's a high level question. Like I'd mentioned, we did 2 parks in Breslau right now, and we have invested in those parks in 2021. We did. Breslau Memorial Park has actually been a focus of mine since starting with the township in 2019, because I understand that it does need some work. So we have focused lots of efforts there. We've also done some work to the parking lot, that sort of thing. So yeah, relative to other needs throughout the township, we've done our best to address Breslau. And when we get new parks online in the Hopewell Crossing side, that sort of thing, we will plan to put playgrounds in and outfit those playgrounds as they should be, or those parks as they should be. Why is the township paying for new parks and new developments? This should be by the land developer. $250,000 is earmarked for Lunar and $120,000 for Birdland, both in Elmira. The new replacement park in Breslau is nowhere near that price. And it shows as it is so tiny. So Birdland, the park development in Birdland is being funded by the developer through an agreement, the subdivision agreement. That developer is giving $500,000 to the township. They've already given us $250,000 and we're slated for another $250,000 next year. And each park is unique in how it's funded. It comes down to the subdivision agreement, what the township negotiates with the developer, whether we take cash in lieu of parkland, that sort of thing. Yeah, that's it, I think, for there. Floridale Picnic Shelter, $90,000. The Breslau Ad Hoc Committee had to raise funds and seek donations for our $30,000 to $45,000 picnic shelter. Funds came out of a $100,000 donation from Conestoga Meats to build it and cover cost overruns. Breslau's told we needs to raise the money for any rec facility. Why does Floridale get theirs for free? So Floridale will be a replacement of an existing asset versus new. Direction from council at the time was to require the residents in the Breslau Ad Hoc Committee to fundraise for this project, because I don't believe at the time it was on the capital plan. It was an addition, and it was funded by Conestoga Meats as well too. The splash pad is being funded by the community at the direction of previous council. So those decisions with regards to those specific assets were directions from the previous council. And as I mentioned, we have invested in Breslau Parks, and we will continue to invest in Breslau Parks the same way we do throughout the township. There's a line for Valley View Park development for a multi-use concrete pad. Again, the Breslau Ad Hoc Committee was told they need to fundraise for this. So I will speak to this when I go back to my presentation. This is being split. This expense is being split between the township and the developer through an agreement. And then confirm what the operational budget has been allowed for in 2023 for the Breslau splash pad. It's not in there. It should be exactly the same as Elmira. If not, have that adjusted. Yeah, we should plan to have it running. So staff have allocated some funds we think that we have some funds under the sufficient funds under the parks water budget for this project. If the funds are raised, realistically, based on lead times right now, we've reached out to one of our contractors. The other one was on vacation this week. But lead times, if funding was available and project was approved tomorrow, wouldn't be constructed until July at the earliest. So even if we were to open the Breslau splash pad in 2023, it would be for a shortened season. So the full operating expenditures would not need to be there in 2023. And then please look at the cost for the Elmira Rec Center. See another 2.2 million for the refrigeration plant this year. So I touched on that already for council.
We skipped number 10.
Oh, number 10.
Sorry.
Oh, I don't have number 10 on my.
Oh, you don't have a 10?
No, I
You
don't.
have.
Do you mind reminding me what number 10
Yeah,
is?
number 10 says nowhere in the 5-year CAPEX does it have any money planned for the Elmira downtown revitalization plan, except for the 75,000 this year for a design. Total estimated costs at the end of the presentation add to 4.762 million. He said he did watch the budget tonight or the infrastructure spending. I'm glad all councillors are looking at ways to lower tax increases by moving projects out. There's a clear need for infrastructure spending on assets that need it. There is no need for this type of spending for Elmira downtown. We must first look at our needs before spending on wants. There are many taxpayers outside of Elmira, and the budget needs to start reflecting that.
Through you, Mayor Shantz, to Councillor Bryan. I don't have that on my list because that question is likely for
Yeah.
Deanne or
Ms.
likely Deanne, maybe Jared.
Yeah, it was on the letter, that's why.
Ms. Freese, can you speak to that?
Yeah, so for the Elmira downtown plan, that is correct that we've proposed the 75,000 just for the design, the detailed design of around the admin building and in the parking lot area. It is a very large project that has a large budget, but when we came forward with the plan to the previous council, we identified that we were going to identify individual items in each budget year as they align with other work that's going on in the area. So we do see this as a need, not a want, like the Elmira downtown area. It's got a community focus. You do have to actually put in some extra money to enhance the area, to make it attractive to the existing residents, to future developers in the area, and potential tourists as well. So it is going to be in there in future budget years. That's all we added in this year because of the tight budget year.
Thank you. And then that just leaves us number 11 then.
Yep.
Did you want to go back and do parks then?
Yes, I believe I answered number 11.
Yeah.
That's right.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mayor Shantz, through you. Parks, apologies. So Bolander Park parking lot, this project is being carried over from 2022 with a slight budget enhancement to replace the sanitary lateral for that washroom. Just makes sense to do it before we pave. Lions Park parking lot lighting, staff are looking to replace the existing parking lot lighting with LEDs just due to the age of the structures, the poles and the bases. Valley View Park development, just to be forthright with council on this one regarding justification for this work. The surface enhancement project is the result of a reconciliation between the developer and the township to address an error in which an asphalt pad was installed in the park, which was originally slated for a concrete pad in the subdivision agreement. So as a result, after much deliberation with the neighborhood community group, as well as the developer, a deal was reached with the developer to pay for half and the township would pay for half. The concrete was budgeted at $40,000. You'll see we have 30 in the budget. Staff have also budgeted another $10,000 for basketball nets and seating. Basketball nets are $7,000, $1,000 a bench for seating as well too. Birdland Park development. So through the subdivision agreement with the developer and as a result of funding being supplied to the township, staff are completing the first phase of this park development in 2023, which will include a playground and multi-use trail. And the second phase will include a multi-use court and extension of the multi-use trail, and that would be in 2024. And then lastly, Bolander Park playground surface replacement. So the existing surface was installed in 2018 along with upgrades to the playground. Surface has posed nothing but issues since the installation. It's degrading. It is a safety concern. Warranty period has lapsed. We've had difficulties in getting the contractor out to repair the surface. To replace the existing surface with however, from a reputable company that we know has installations that have lasted 10 plus years. throughout the region, we would be looking at $80,000 in funding. I would like to also present an opportunity or present an option to council as well too, just to be fully transparent with council. Staff could replace the existing flooring with an engineered wood fiber material, which is typically what we do at our other parks. It is somewhat less accessible. However, this would come in roughly $40,000 for this project. So that is an option for council to consider. And with that, I can go back to any questions council may have.
Councillor Cadeau.
Thank you, Mayor, through you. To Thomas, you know what? To Thomas, all right. I'm just gonna say it. I'm losing track of what I was gonna say here. First question. I'm gonna go all the way back because this is the one I'm thinking of now. But when you had referenced the potential of getting grant money for like the EV stations and stuff like that, do you have a date into when that decision could be made?
Yeah, through your response to Councillor Cadeau. The feasibility study grant application is in process at the moment. I'm not certain on timelines. We are fairly certain that we are going to and hopeful that we're going to be successful with that grant based on past applications that have been done by Simcoe, the contractor that's doing it for us. The EV charging station program is going live, I believe, in January. So that one would be a little bit more delayed. Yeah.
Thank you. And the second question relates to the replacement of Bollender there. What turf is it? It's not the splash pad, it's the playground itself. Is it like that rubbery style material?
Correct. Yes.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Other questions? Councillor Bryant.
Thank you. This might be a Richard question. We're looking at new vehicles. Have we done an analysis of leasing versus purchasing to see if there's cost benefits to going that route?
Through you, Madam Mayor, I don't think we've done a full analysis of it, but we've talked about it at senior management, and I think some of the issues gets back into well, what type of vehicles would you be looking at? Because you'd only really be looking at our pickup trucks. I think that would really kind of fit that criteria. You wouldn't be able to rent a plow truck. If you rent a plow truck, you're also renting the driver. So you wouldn't be renting fire vehicles and stuff like that. But I think some of the challenges, even we've had to lease vehicles, like some of our pickup trucks, especially during the pandemic when we had to make sure that we only had one occupant in the vehicle. And we found that if we were to probably follow that same pattern of what we were spending, we probably were going to spend way more than we were just actually purchasing it. But I think, it would require further investigation into different companies that may offer better services and better rates. So it's something we'd have to look at. I think the other challenge that we'd be facing as well is we can be pretty hard on our vehicles, especially our pickup trucks. And if part of the lease arrangement was that we'd have to fix everything, if it was our vehicle, we wouldn't fix it. We send it to the auction as is. So we'd have to kind of factor in that kind of cost when we go through that evaluation.
Councillor Schwint and then Councillor Grant.
Just following up on Councillor Bryant, would it make sense also to look at paying mileage versus buying the new electric vehicles as part of our deliberations next week? Probably should have asked this question Monday night, but I did miss it.
Through you, Madam Mayor. So I guess for some clarification from Councillor Swint, are you referring to us having staff utilize their own vehicles as opposed to buying vehicles? That's correct?
Correct.
Yeah.
Two electric vehicles.
Yeah. I think sometimes the challenge that we have and specifically from last week's conversation with the building department, they utilize their vehicles quite a lot. And sometimes it gets very hard for staff to be able to say, well, like, I'm using my vehicle. I don't want to use my vehicle. They would rather have a township vehicle. And I think sometimes that becomes a bit of that. I wish Mr. Hiker was here because he may be able to corroborate that. My understanding is that sometimes that can be a challenge with the retention and the attraction of staff, saying that if you want me to use my own vehicle, why would I, put a ton of mileage on my vehicle as opposed to having another like township vehicle available that I can utilize? That
My
is a
experience
potential.
has been that's a great moneymaker. Being paid mileage, but that's my experience.
And rightful so. I think there are some staff that absolutely think that. I would totally admit that, but I think there are other staff that don't feel the exact same way. So I think it is that balance. I think that's really the tough part.
I did. I know from the county point of view, you've done a great job this year dividing Parks and Rec from other departments. Are we losing operational efficiency by having Parks and Recs have their own snowplow, mowing department, that type of thing? Operations doing the same thing. Listening to the delegation earlier this evening with a parks tree on one side and a roadway tree on the other side. Could we be more efficient for as taxpayers if we combine operations?
Yeah, through you, Mayor Shantz, to Councillor Schwint. There are definitely items over the years that we have consolidated as departments for efficiencies, and then there's actually some areas that we have divided. One of them being tree maintenance, one of them being, as some of council may have noticed, purchase of fleet was at one point in time under the Recreation Community Services Department. The issue that we've had, and I can speak to trees with this, is just the amount of work that's required. And that's why for trees, we have the operations roads department that's taking care of theirs. We have parks that's taking care of theirs. And then we have engineering staff as well too that are managing our boulevard tree replacement program. And for one staff person to take on all of that work, unfortunately, at this point in time, the resources aren't there for that. In terms of contracted services, however, though, we do have the operations department overseeing a lot of the snow removal. The Parks and Rec department does oversee all of the turf maintenance contracts as well too, for all of the roadsides, cul-de-sacs, that sort of thing. So to answer your question, yes, we're always looking for efficiencies, but also keeping in mind how much it's on one person's desk.
Councillor Grant.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Shantz, to Thomas. Just switching gears a bit, I wanted to ask about the Conestoga Community Center and maybe get some history and context about why that building's not being used and more of a facility for storage.
Yes, through Mayor Shantz. So I will, what context can I give? So that building was used at one point in time. It was rented out to a daycare. We have gone back out since that tenant left. I'm not sure when, maybe 2019, 18, 19, looking for interest to rent that facility again. And we were not able to find anyone. And so rather than having it sit there empty, our Tweak and Trees for Woolwich, and I believe the Trail Group as well too, have been utilizing that space as their kind of meeting space, their storage for a lot of their tree equipment, that sort of thing. So it is being used. It is also the source for watering for the outdoor rink in the winter, because we need to have ideally a heated space for the water source. So that volunteer group uses it as well. So it is being used. Budget is very small, but it looks big if council's not aware that there are volunteer groups using it.
Just to follow up through you, Mayor Shantz. The reason I bring it up is when I was speaking with residents of Conestoga, they expressed some frustration that they felt that building wasn't accessible to them. I'm just wondering, when was the last time we assessed whether there was an interest in using that building? Was it recent, or was it more when that tenant moved out a couple of years ago?
So that would have been likely in pre-pandemic, yes. Yeah, in 2019. I know that we have had interest. We had an individual approach staff in 2022, late 2022, with requests to use it. I don't know if you can speak to that, Jen, provide any context, or.
I think I'm trying to remember what we had to go in and clean it. I think it was, sorry, it's a small space, and because it was used as a daycare, it's got low toilets, and I don't know if you've been in. So we've also used it as a day camp location as well. Just because it's been used with volunteer groups, et cetera, there would have to be a lot of work to go in and just clean it up. But certainly if it's a space that the community would like to move forward and rent, that's something we can certainly look at for 2023.
Okay, yeah.
I'll add, because my thoughts are coming back to me as well too. And speaking with our environmental coordinator, Ann, whose groups are using that space, she has expressed to me that it is at the moment fairly full with a lot of their equipment
And trees, I
Um,
think, for a little while.
and trees. And it is used throughout the summer as months as well too for our summer camp program. We run programming out of there as well.
Okay. So I just maybe as something that staff could look at is maybe assessing with the community again and seeing if there is the desire to use that building, and maybe we can come to a decision later down the road about whether making it rentals available for community would be a possibility.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Mr. Brenneman.
Yeah, through you, Madam Mayor, to Councillor Grant. One other piece of historical context I'd like to provide is that it might also be an opportunity for us to do a more recent assessment on what interest may exist from a community center standpoint, because I may need some help from Richard Petherick here, but I believe back when we were doing the recreational capital facilities campaign in around 2007 and 2008, there was the Woolwich Recreational Facilities Foundation and then the Fit for the Future fundraising campaign. And they were trying to work with various communities on their interest. You know, for example, we built a brand new community center in Maryhill and then also the one in Breslau. At that time, again, that's a long time ago though, you know, the Conestoga community said they were fine with, you know, the existing facility. They weren't interested, even though the group, the Fit for Funding fundraising campaign, would have gladly, developed a campaign around that. There just wasn't the same uptake in the community. But I think by you raising this, I think we should not just look at the existing facility, but look at what the community sees as the future needs, because it's been over 15 years since that original discussion with the community.
Councillor Schwint.
Through you, Mayor Schatz, Mr. Petherick, I guess I should know, but how many more years on the Memorial Center debenture?
So through you, Madam Mayor, we took a 25-year debenture on that, and I believe we're about halfway now. So we're probably in that like 12 to 13 years left.
Councillor Cadell.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you. I'm just going to stick with Thomas. It rolled off the tongue so much easier. This is a really, I mean, I've been hearing from constituents who are going to the Woolwich Memorial Center quite often. The simple things, you know, being able to get some popcorn or a pop while they watch a game. Can you kind of speak to when that concession may be back up and potentially earning the region some money?
Yes, through you, Madam Mayor, to Mr. Cadeau. The concession opened on Monday. Yay. We issued an RFP just prior to the pandemic, and then the pandemic hit and it closed. We got rid of all of our food items, obviously. We have been working with Woolwich Minor Hockey for them to run that concession. So they have gone out, they've trained staff, and they opened successfully on Monday. And there was a big lineup today at the high school hockey game. So we're very thrilled to be able to do that and be able to give back to the community and to one of our sport organizations as well. So as a means for them to fundraise. So fingers crossed it's going to go well for them. It seems to be a successful start.
Thank you. If I can follow up, just with relation, when we're on the topic of hockey, I suppose, we had mentioned or we had heard about an outdoor rink. I think it's behind the fire hall, right? No, an outdoor hockey rink
In Elmira or
yeah.
St. Jacobs or
St. Jacobs. That's right.
In-
That's why I'm never able to find it. What is do we have an average cost of what it is to operate that?
So our through your response to Councillor Cadeau, our outdoor rink program is completely volunteer run. We typically through Breslau, Maryhill, Heidelberg, Conestoga have been very successful operations for our outdoor rink program. A group of volunteers that's responsible for operating the rink. Staff complete inspections just to make sure they're safe, that sort of thing. We go through bit more of an extensive volunteer training program that maybe is needed, but we want to make sure that, the ice surface is good for skating and safe for patrons. So I don't have the average cost for you, but we're looking at water and some hydro and maybe some, some other assistance for our group, shovels, that sort of thing.
Okay, so I mean, if organizers wanted to get a rink going up in Elmira, it'd be up to them to organize, maybe find a spot that would be suitable.
Yeah, through your motion to Councillor Cadeau. Yes, absolutely. The majority of the rinks that I just spoke to are located at a facility with a water source. So that's a big one for us. In the past, the fire department has helped out, but as you can imagine, it's quite the task to be taking fire trucks out, and it's not something that we can do on a regular basis to flood rinks. So all of our rinks, aside from a new one that's being installed right now in St. Jacobs in the Valley View Park, is near a water source. So that's ideal. Typically the process, if there's a group of volunteers that are interested, have them reach out to myself or staff at the Woolwich Memorial Center, and we'll provide some direction.
Thank you.
Councillor Grant.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Shantz, to Thomas. I wanted to ask about 22 Mockingbird Drive and whether about delaying that project. Is that something that can be done with the demolition of that building? Is it basically feasible to leave it another year?
Yeah, through Mayor Shantz to Councillor Grant. That is an option. Do you mind if I ask reason why you'd like to delay?
Yes, through you, Mayor. Mostly because of the price point. I'm wondering if we can use that money somewhere else this year. I'm just trying to figure out a way. I will in regards to our delegates earlier, I am in full support of a climate action manager. I think it's something that we need to seriously work towards as a community, towards becoming environmentally sustainable. So that question is really just coming from a desire to see if there's ways that we can fit that into this budget.
Yeah, through you, Mayor Shantz to Councillor Grant. I'm sure Mr. Patrick will hop on after me to provide some further clarity. But that project is slated to be funded from our infrastructure reserve fund and our property building reserve fund. So, well, you know what? Maybe I'll just hand it over to Richard.
Yeah, through you, Madam Mayor. I think the challenge, as Thomas is indicating, is it's coming from reserve fund. So that's where the funding is coming from. So I think what we have to do is find other projects that would fit the utilization of those reserve funds that would otherwise be using levy, and sort of do some switch outs from that. So I think it's going to take some investigation. I know from a parks and a property perspective, it's not funded from the levy. Typically, so that is an area that we'd have to kind of shift off and look elsewhere.
Anyone else? Okay, thank you. Then we'll move on to fire. And
Thank you.
are we
Thanks, Council.
turning it over to Chief Wallace and Deputy Chief Eveson, I think. A few moments again while we shuffle.
Right, so,
Welcome, Chief and Deputy Chief.
thank you. Good evening. Good evening, Mayor, and Council. We've seen some of yous earlier today, so it's nice to see yous all again. So we're gonna present our fire services budget. To say this year has been a trying, taxing year, it has been for us. Even through the budget process, similar to other departments, we've had to make some substantial cuts in order to keep ourselves in a more fiscally responsible budget. So. There you go. So give you an idea for just an idea of what we've done in this year. So in 2022, we've done 642 calls across the township. So it's broken down. The ones you see for every station that's there is that's the calls that are originated in their area. We have a lot of multi-station calls in order to meet our needs across the board. Just to give you a bit of a background on the calls, the way they've been going. From 2022, for 2022 over 2021, that was a 15% increase. So we've gotten busier in the township. The more, the bigger the subdivisions, the more people that move in around, we are getting busier as go by. Years ago, Elmira used to be the major player, which they still are, but the differential between Elmira and Breslau, you can see, is getting smaller and smaller and smaller. So in 2021, we did 560 calls. In 2020, we were at 486, and in 2019, we're at 489. So you can see we're gradually getting higher. We do fluctuate back and forth. But just to give you an idea, we are getting bigger and a lot busier. And the picture there is just kind of let you know, it's kind of hard to see, but that's the new Maryhill Fire Hall as of January the 3rd. So the foundation's in, they're moving forward. I've been told that the framing has already started in there, so it will not take them long to see a lot more substantial building than what you see there currently. So in operating, I'm just going to go over some of the highlights. Some of the highlights of what we have. Deputy Eveson will speak a little bit about increasing our staff. We're looking at putting in a full-time training officer in for this year. That's removing the part-time that we have currently and making it a full-time position.
So so the training officer position, the reason being transitioning it from a part-time to a full-time position is earlier in the year, the Ontario Fire Marshal introduced mandatory certification for all firefighters inside the province of Ontario. Prior to that, it was implied that you should follow that thing, but there's never any mandate or regulation stating you must have certification, which all changed come June when they introduced regulation 343-12 or /12, I think it is, saying that all firefighters in the province need to be trained to the service level they're providing the citizens through our ENR bylaw. So as such, the amount of training that needs to take place, as well as the records that need to be kept of that training, should we need to prove the fact that we've fulfilled the regulation, needs to be maintained, and that's where the full-time training officer comes in. It's a large task. We have 160 staff. They all need relevant documentation showing what they've done and what they've completed, as well as some other factors like changing learning environments, people's needs, accessibility, and so on need to be met, and that all takes time to manufacture and to put together and make sure there's relevant training. So in a part-time capacity, it's no longer feasible just because the time it requires and the amount of focus and dedication it would take to do that.
So one of the next major drivers for our increases is their increase to our equipment reserve fund. The need for this is to cover the cost of the rapid increase of fire trucks and equipment. Between the pumper that we purchased for St. Jacobs, which we're still waiting upon, we got some pricing on a rescue for Conestoga. We've seen a 200,000 plus increase in less than 1 year. And it's to give you a bit of historic context to that is we would probably see that type of an increase over the life expectancy of a truck over 20 years. And that's just driven by market value. We started doing a more substantial increase into this fund last year, followed by into this year. And the way the market is running right now is we are probably going to have to look at doing this for many years to come in order to keep up with this environment. I was talking to a salesman from one of our truck manufacturers right now, and he was telling me just last week that this is going to go on for a long period of time because right now, any truck that was priced in 2020 they're basically making zero or no money on at all. So we're going to see this market go on for a little bit longer. Mr. Petrich can add anything on the financial side a little bit more if he has anything.
Sure, I can do that right now. So through you, Madam Mayor, to Council, it is incredibly challenging. I think just as Chief Allis, indicates. So the draft fire services budget right now, if you look at last year's, we were budgeting, just shy of $315,000 in to transfer into the equipment reserve. We were originally looking at raising that to $522,000, and that is purely in the reflection of the increase in those fire vehicles. And, I think as Chief Alder said, it's a very rapid increase. And we just realized that, and this is all from levy. So we realized that's a pretty steep increase all in 1 year. So we said, okay, we're going to have to phase that in through at least 2 years. So we dropped that back $100,000. The concern is that we are starting to see some of our fire trucks, which really have a 20-year lifespan, and after that 20 years, they must be replaced. And of course, you can speak more on the fire regulation side, but my understanding is they need to be replaced. And we're starting to see those things in very successive years, like year after year after year, these trucks are going to be needing to be replaced. And we were not putting enough money aside because we were not expecting the trucks to be in and around the $800,000-900,000. We were used to them being in around the $300,000 to $500,000. So I think in the next couple of years, it's going to be a bit of a balancing act for us from our equipment reserve fund. We may be going into a bit of a deficit in that, but I mean, it does have its own funding source. So we're going to have to really juggle around and be careful with what vehicles we purchase. Hopefully we might be able to find some grant funding if we start converting to electric vehicles. Maybe that may be able to help us out. But again, it's a balancing act. So I think just the parting comment on that is even though we've seen these rapid increases, we just realized that transfer to the equipment reserve from the fire perspective needs to be kind of phased in. So we were planning on doing the 200,000 increase, but it's just left now to 100,000 increase.
Another thing, the 900,000 that we have in for a truck for this year, right now, the building times are running anywhere from 12 months, 18 months, 24 months. So just because we have it in now as an allocation, the expenditure of it is going to be in the future still. So just so you're kind of clear on that. Some of our trucks, because that timeline is out there, we will be coming forward for pre-budget approval so we can start purchasing them so we can get them in a more timely manner. The next one is deals with our volunteer firefighter wages. We have slated a 7% increase to their wages this year. This is year 2 of a 3-year plan. We came last year last year we realized that our firefighters are substantially underpaid compared to a lot of our neighbors are. So we came up with a plan in order to get them up to a wage that is substantial to what with what the job they're doing, but with also our neighbors across the region. So that'll be, that's, like I said, that's a stage fan in. Another driver that we have is an increase to our officers' pays, and this is the year 2 of a 4-year stage plan we have in to do that. The reason for staging all these increases in is to try and keep the impact on our budget as low as we can, but still get our firefighters and our officers a noticeable increase so that we can do better retention on them. So that's operating. There's a like I said, it's just 4 little minor, well, 4 in things of major impact on the equipment, on our capital. I broke it down into 2 different groupings. So one is vehicle replacement, like we've heard our 2001 rescue for Conestoga is up this year. So we're hoping to, and that replacement cost is looking at through pricing from last year, we're looking at $900,000 for it. An idea of how we're going to purchase it is the township is part of a buying group called Canoe/Sourcewell. So we can work through them to get the best price that we can get on the truck that we're looking for. Another one that came up is our 2007 Argo and trailer. I actually had this budgeted for a couple of years in the future, but the repairs on it and are starting to get to the point where it exceeds the value of the current vehicle. Just to relate on how it's been happening. The couple last calls is we've actually had to have a firefighter manipulate a piece of it with a piece of pliers in order so we can actually finish what we're doing and get the vehicle back to get up on a trailer. So it's the health and safety on it is getting there. So it's up for replacement. We're not just stuck on an Argo. We're actually looking at SUV or the UTVs. The other one is a 2012 Dodge truck. The concept behind the truck is it was actually up for replacement in 2020 because our small trucks, according to our policies, is an 8-year replacement schedule on them. The thought process is we deferred it until we needed a truck. So the truck that pulls our Argo currently is a 2006 that we got from Public Works when it reached their expiry when they were replacement on it. So it's getting older. It's a 2-door, 3/4 ton truck. So what we're trying to do is shuffle some trucks around. We have a 2015 that's not up for, we've deferred replacement on it. It's a crew cab, it's 4-wheel drive, so it's better suited for getting people to and from what we use the Argo for, which is search and rescue, rescues on trails, wildland fires. So it makes it a little easier to get around with it. And the last one that we have is we call it capital equipment or capital requests. So our annual bunker gear replacement. Our bunker gear is set for a 10-year replacement cycle as per NFPA 1971. This year we are joining with Wellesley, Wilmot, and North Dumfries in purchasing gear to keep our costs down as low as we can. Through that process, we've also been looking at upgrading our bunker gear to include a carcinogen blocking barrier in them. So carcinogens cause cancers, so we're getting this barrier put in so we can try and eliminate any unneeded WSIB claims down the road. The second one we're looking at is an air filling station for Bresla. So you wonder what an air filling station is? This is a unit that we use to fill our SCBA bottles that we wear, our air packs we wear into hazardous environments. This one was actually slated to go in originally when the fire hall was built, but because of budget restraints and equipment, it's been deferred. So the need for it, with the amount of calls that Bresla is running, the need for it is to be down there with the airport and everything. So we're looking to put it into this year. And the last is ropes and equipment for rope rescue. These are needed to enhance our ability to conduct patient rescue and recovery during ice water, low angle. We've had a few cases in Bresla across from the airport. We've had a couple of cars go off down into that nice ravine. And we've had to go down, rappel down to get patients. So it's equipment to enhance all those rescues that we need to do. And the lifespan of this equipment is 8 to 10 years. So we'll be seeing a replacement in our schedule that we'll just keep in replacing it in that length of time. With that, that puts me to the end of our presentation. Is there any questions?
Thank you, Councillor Cadeau.
Thank you, Mayor, through you to the chief. In your draft budget, you were requesting a full-time training officer. You have a part-time training officer now, and you also have a half admin that you share with another department. Is that correct?
Yes.
Do you think that if you were to have a full admin, that they could potentially support the part-time training officer, facilitate that better?
Through Madam Mayor to Councillor Cadeau, the skill set that's required for our training officer is it's specialized. Like there's different training courses and everything that I have to have in order to do that. And in admin support, our admin support currently looks after all our burn permits when people call in to do that. She looks after all our reporting to the OFM. She's responsible for probably 100% of our revenue that we get because we bill for auto residents and car accidents. So that time takes up the majority of the time that she currently has as that. The training officer, for what he needs to do is keeping on track of what we're doing. Plus it's also making sure that we're in legislation, we're making sure that training courses are being ran, but also running the training courses. And keeping us legislated, like I said, if the province comes and asks something, that we're covered through that.
Thank you.
Councillor Bryant.
I have a couple of questions through you to the fire chief. I'm looking at your payroll, your staffing costs, and I've seen 3 of the departments. The staffing costs have gone way down this year. Like, for example, I'm looking at Breslau, and the staffing costs for 2022 were 148,621. And yet for 2023, you're proposing 92,927. Can you explain to me why there's such a big difference?
Through Madam Mayor to Councillor Bryant. So what we do when we predict our budget for our station people is we take a 5-year average. So the unfortunate part with the 5-year average currently is with the pandemic going through, the amount of medical calls, which is our EMS style calls, we're basically went down to almost 0 because we're trying to keep ourselves and EMS staff protected through COVID. So our number of calls that we ran those years were a lot lower than what we're running now. So we're using a 5-year average, and we hope we can get the best we can get. But like you see, like we're a 15% increase from last year to this year, like from 21 to 22. So We
Right.
didn't really know that average. We didn't know that average until the year ended. So
So would it not have made sense then to take the 2022 actual and use that as your budget number for this year? I'm just trying to figure out why. Richard?
Yeah, to you, Madam Mayor. I think the difficulty with the volunteer firefighters and the call volumes that they have is you can't say that what happened last year is going to happen the next year.
Okay.
And I think that's why the chief is talking about taking this 5-year average, and it kind of starts to get to the point that you're smoothing these ups and downs as you go through. And it is a hard go. Because you never know what's going to happen. You can definitely see circumstances where, the fire departments have very low calls one year, and then the next year they just get a ton of calls because unfortunately things just happen. So that's why he's using that 5-year average and not looking at just what happened last year, because you can't say that same thing's going to happen the following year.
Okay, yeah, because I saw 3 different stations with that
Yep.
exact trend, and I was really
Yep.
trying to figure out how you could take a number and drop it that drastically
Yeah,
and prepare a budget to make it work.
Yeah, I think 2022 was a very challenging year for the fire department.
Right.
They had a lot of calls, a lot more than they typically would.
Okay,
But again, that's not indicative that trend is going to continue into the following year. Hopefully it does not. It's one of those areas where you really don't want to have it happen, because if it does, that means somebody is going through something very unpleasant.
exactly.
So.
Can I have one follow-up? And I guess my other question relates to Nathan's about the fire training officer. Is this something that could be handled in-house by one of your full-time firefighters? Is it something they could take on and train the rest of the staff?
through Madam Mayor to Councillor Bryant, through our hiring process, and we do this, staff does this in general, like Township does this in general, is we look at internal and external people. So if we have an external candidate that is willing to take on this position, that is how we will be looking to do.
And does it warrant bringing in, I guess, full-time, or is it something that could be done on a part-time basis, but internally by existing people? Without,
That's currently we have right now. It's a part-time staff
okay,
that works for us that's doing it.
So currently the part-time training officer is also one of our volunteer firefighters.
okay,
So in addition to his part-time training officer role, he's also a volunteer firefighter. So to ask an additional time and away from his family or whoever it might be. I get what you're saying. Can we spread it out over the more volunteers? But the idea of the volunteer service is to give the time you have available to respond to emergencies. So I don't think asking more people would necessarily benefit us, because then you'd be kind of shuffling their work around. It wouldn't be as coordinated and clear and concise as we need it to be.
okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Councillor Schwinn.
Thanks, Mayor Schatz. I guess first I want to echo some concerns Councillor Bryant, Councillor Cadeau brought up, that the staffing costs to me aren't overly realistic for next year. But the good news is I think that's one budget item that council just pays, and whatever it works out to be, budget's kind of irrelevant. I am though concerned on the wages. You've got a 3-year plan with that 7% increase, and that was probably derived in a error of 2% inflation. So that 7% really, instead of catching up right now, we're just treading water. So is there a plan to address that, or is that already taken into account? The first one.
Through Madam Mayor to Councillor Swint. So when we did the factoring, is we kind of projected to what increases would be happening between the time we started to the time the 3-year plan was in place. So we kind of figured in the best we could into what inflation would be and what increases would be normally to our non-union staff. So it's a 21% increase by the time we're done. That gets us to approximately where we projected through talking to some of our neighbors where they would be at that time. So we're hoping that that's where it is. And then going forward, instead of not, we'll just be using our normal increase that non-unionized staff would get to keep that from going forward so we don't get behind.
Thank you. I guess my concern is we're still a little bit late there, but we'll see over time. And then on the training side of things, is that something where we could be more efficient, talking to a couple of our neighboring townships and sharing a training officer that can oversee a larger group of people, maybe with more expertise and skills?
Through Madam Mayor to Councillors, it is, it's an option that we can look at. Currently with 160 firefighters, 6 stations. Some of our plan is to try and get all our training lined up so that all the stations are training the exact same thing with lesson plans and stuff. Once we get through that, we can potentially look at that. We're already doing a joint training committee with our neighboring townships. So we're already sharing resources for courses like pump operations, driver training, rope rescue, ice and water. So we're consolidating our classes in order to get our people up to where we need to get to. So we're already consolidating with them and their training officers in order to make that happen. So.
Councillor Cadeau.
Thank you, Mayor, through you to the chief. Are you actively recruiting? Do you kind of envision your numbers staying relatively consistent for your volunteer firefighters? Or do you kind of see that growing as the community grows over the next 3, 5, 10 years?
Through Madam Mayor to Councillor Cadeau. We are, right now, we're just playing, it seems like we're playing catch up. So this is the second year in a row in 2022. Like our recruit class just started last night and we're at a group of 13. Last year we were at 12. So we're just replacing what needs to be replaced. In years gone by, when we first opened up the station in Breslau, they started at, I don't know how many people would say 15 people, but then it's been increased as that gets bigger, the more staff gets added on to make those calls work, which is something that we're watching to see what we need to do. And it's something that through the Fire Protection Prevention Act, we come back to council because council actually regulates what we do for a fire department, how many people we do, what type of responses we do. So that's a decision for council, but we're watching to see. Breslau is a very active one because the population there is growing quickly. I grew up in Woolwich and I can remember when Breslau was just a small little, I don't know, for lack of a better term, 15 houses in a little mall. Like now you look at it and it's huge. Like, so we're watching to see what we need to do. If we need to increase staffing, it'll come back to you for a recommendation in order to do that. Through budget, I imagine, but I don't know exactly when they did that the last time, but we're looking for pre-budget approval in order to hire no more people.
Yeah, and as a follow-up, it was more a question related to the need for the staff training officer. It's, something to justify it if they're going to be seeing all these new recruits coming in and having to ensure that, the basic trainings are met in addition to all of the upkeep. So it was just trying to get a sense of how many additional we're taking on. It seems about 12 to 13 per year is an average.
Right now, that is where we've been sitting. We've been sitting in double digits for the last 3 or 4 years. We had a very aging staff. We have some firefighters that are still with us that are in the 50-year, 40-year category, but it drops pretty quick. When you get down to where I am at the 26-year mark, and then after that, the average expectancy of a firefighter right now in the volunteer world is 5 years. You retain them for 5 years and you're hiring new people. So
How long would it take to fully train a volunteer firefighter?
So in order to get them up to the NFPA standard, which the province wants us to get to, we started last year not really knowing how long it would take. We're looking at, they started last year in January and we're looking at March. They're looking at about a 15-month. With that being said, they had July and August basically off so they get to spend time with their families. So we're looking at about a 12-month period of time, the way we have it set up. So
Mr. Brenner.
Thanks, Madam Mayor, through you to Chief Aldis. Chief, can we use this opportunity maybe to do partly some council orientation in terms of, I don't think we've talked to date about how our size of fire stations or the number of stations, the number of volunteers compares to the other 3 townships throughout the region, just to give council some context in terms of stations, volunteers, relative to our comparators.
So through Madam Mayor to council. Right now, the Township of Woolwich is the largest volunteer fire department within the region. So we hold 6 stations. We have 160 volunteer firefighters. Wellesley, our neighbor, they have 3 stations and they have 90 firefighters. Wilmot has 3 stations and approximately 90 firefighters. And North Dumfries has 1 station and I think they're around the 30 firefighter mark. So we are the biggest around. I did a radio interview a few years ago before COVID, and the gentleman asked like how big is Woolwich? Like, so we're 32,000 square hectares approximately. And he goes like, can you put that in context of size? I said, so basically it's all of Waterloo and the better half of Kitchener is what we're covering. Like, it's a huge area. So if you even look at Center Wellington, who's next door, they only have 2 stations, like, and they have 60 firefighters. Like, we're huge. I don't know of too many within a short area of us that are as large as we are as a municipality. So.
Thank you, Councillor Bryant.
Thank you. Through you to the chief. Are all our current firefighters up to standards as far as the new regulations? All of them have had enough training so that they are adequately, I guess, trained to go out to fires without running into issues.
So through Madam Mayor to Councillor Bryant. So a number of years ago, the Ontario Fire Marshal came up with what they call a grandfathering factor. So at that time, anybody who had, I forget what the threshold is on years that they were allowed to become grandfathered to be the NFPA standard. So that's firefighter 1, firefighter 2, the hazardous materials awareness operations, and the auto extrication, so our vehicle, our MVC car accident stuff. There's a group that we have in there that's legacy, which we're just working through right now, which would give them an Ontario seal. So that's not NFPA regulated, but it's Ontario regulated. So that whole group of people there are fully trained, ready to recognized by the province. Our last recruit class, like I said, they'll be done. They've written level 1. They've taken the practical skills assessments for level 1. They're writing their level 2 testing in March and doing their assessment for practical skills. They've taken their hazardous materials awareness. So we only have 1 more course and they would be up to the speed of what we need as well. And the first class is going. So the majority of our firefighters are all where we need them to be at this current time.
So we would only be training new recruits then, basically, to get them up to speed. So 12 to 15 a year roughly.
For firefighter 1, firefighter 2, but with that, we have to keep up. So we do ice and water rescue teams. So we have to keep them up to the standard.
Right.
The new standard for that's coming out, so we got to keep them up to going. Because of the nature of the industry within Elmira, we're got to get a lot of our Elmira people, even some Breslau, up to the technicians level and hazardous materials. There's pump ops courses that we constantly have to keep running in order to get enough people to run our trucks for us. So there's constantly going to be training going on. It's not like we're just doing recruit training. We have all this other training that we have to keep going and keep up at the same time.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, you guys have through you, Madam Mayor, Councilor Brian. So it's not a one and done thing for these certifications. So you heard the fire chief talk about firefighter 1, for example. These are your basic key skills that you'd use as a firefighter, firefighter 1, firefighter 2. But then each year you have to do maintenance on those because you get skills fade. So any of the skills you learned in the initial onset of your training have to be maintained through the course of the year. So our firefighters meet twice a month at their stations, respective stations, and do what we call maintenance training, or they'll introduce like a new concept, like electric vehicles, which was a hot topic tonight. So they're the conventional vehicle rescue and vehicle fires don't subscribe to the EVs. They're a whole different weapon. They're like a 3-day burn. So just training on new standards and new technology and all that stuff is like a continual revision and revisement, kind of staying with industry standards to kind of elaborate on what the fire chief said. Thanks.
Any other questions for chief and deputy chief? Councillor Cadeau. go
Thank
ahead.
you. Through you, Mayor, to the chief. Obviously, no decisions have been made, but should it not be approved, what do you feel would be the recourse from you? Would you be able to navigate this for the next year before coming forward before council again and kind of maybe discussing this again? Do you like, how do you feel this is going to play out? Should a no be the answer?
Through Madam Mayor to Councillor Cadeau. It's the liability upon what we're doing, like it's in order to achieve what we need to achieve to make our citizens basically safe. This position's needed, like it's just going to be difficult. Like right now, currently we're doing it off of, and I know it sounds a cliche, but we're doing it, 3 people doing a job right now that 1 person should really be doing on their own. Because I look after some stuff, Deputy Eveson's looks after some, our training officer looks after some, and then it's trying to meet and make sure we're not overlapping and missing anything that's going across. It's in the green book for us for training. We have to have a competent person and we have to be competently trained, and that's just where everything seems to be going with us now.
Thank you. I recognize it was an impossible question. So, I mean, you did a good job answering it. Thank you.
We're to elaborate again on what the chief said, we're at the tipping point now where we're maxed out at the resources we have. And if we don't start actively solving the problem, we're gonna get behind, like paying for the trucks and all that other stuff that we're kind of behind on. So it is, we're basically at the pinnacle of what we can do as far as performance wise, and we need the extra help where it's gonna fall apart.
Mr. Brenneman.
Yeah, through you, Madam Mayor, to Dennis and Craig. I'm wondering if you gentlemen could actually speak to, I guess, the overall broader component of this. So you mentioned that the 3 of you are sharing the responsibilities. You mentioned about managing risk and liability. So what other parts of your respective jobs, you know, are obviously taking up a considerable amount of your workload? And if we stay, for argument's sake, with the status quo, what other parts of your jobs are suffering right now in terms of ability to meet our other obligations with respect to provincial legislation, those sorts of things?
So through Madam Mayor to Mr. Brenneman and council, as part of our work, it's day-to-day work for suppression, making sure that everybody has all the equipment they need, ordering all that, being on scene for any major incidents like the one at the airport where the flare jet went off the end. That's part of it, but the other part is with planning through the Bill 23, like all that stuff crosses well my desk. So all the site plan approvals, all the on-farm business stuff that we're working on with site plans, getting them all legalized. Asset management, the region has us now involved in the water infrastructure replacement stuff to make sure that we're getting what we need. I know you've heard about the Church Street East expansion. So when they went to put the new hydrants, they were planning to put fire hydrants up there. So they consulted with us to make sure, and we were part of that whole planning process to get the hydrants where we need them. All the fire prevention stuff that comes across, we look after and coordinate all that. And we do have some firefighters that help us out in that, but there's a lot of day-to-day stuff that just that we do, like budgeting, trying to make sure that we don't go over budget, making sure we get all our trucks repaired, making sure all bills are paid. Like it's a lot of work for basically two of us to do, plus trying to coordinate training.
For myself, to answer your question, Mr. CEO, my portfolio includes the Waterloo International Airport. So this year we had to do a large scale incident, or a mock-up of a large scale incident. So we coordinated through obviously the region of Waterloo, but all the emergency responders, so police, fire, EMS, we're all on scene. We did a full workup on two scenarios. One was a plane crash where they actually bring in a fuselage on a trailer, park it in one of the fields and turn on the smoke machines. So we went out and did like a full response to that, involving all three of the major agencies, as well as the airlines. And then another was a bomb threat in one of the terminals. So just coordinating that with all the agencies, several meetings. That's one of the things, our critical incident stress management team. So making sure that they're looked after and they're taking care of our people. We had some pretty tragic incidents this year. Training, staffing, we're basically our own human resources department. Obviously, we're the first stop, and then the bigger picture is obviously the corporate HR, but just the day-to-day needs of human resources, as well as what else do I lay out there? Equipment, filling impromptu rinks for the community in St. Jacobs. I spent 2 hours out there today with our part-time training officer filling the rink for the community. Coordinating with other people, the Waterloo Regional or Waterloo Railway, keeping them happy and on the tracks. They need water for the big steam engine. Just stuff like that. It wouldn't seem like it's time consuming maybe to the outsider, but it does take quite a bit of time to do all that, as well as policy review and health and safety. So we have our own joint health and safety committee within the fire department, because we're a bit of a strange animal as far as health and safety is concerned. Like when you tell someone you're purposely going into a burning building, they kind of look at you sideways from a health and safety standpoint, right? So just with all that, it does add up. So to answer your question, that's kind of how we keep ourselves busy during the day.
And our CMC, Avril Tanner, which some of you met in person today, she reports to me. So that's also another portfolio that we look after, is emergency management with the help of CEO Brenneman. So and one of his staff members. So we're not just this little thing like this. We're huge. So
Yeah, I think sometimes when you say volunteer fire department, people think of a church committee or something. But all 160 of these firefighters have to be as well trained as any full-time fire organization, right? And so sometimes we need to just sit back and remember that. And sometimes other people need to sit back and remember that too, and just realize that our firefighters are as well trained as any fire department. And some of them are better trained and have more specialties as well. So thank you to you and to the department for keeping up with the training and for keeping us safe. Are there any other questions? No? Okay. Thank you very much. And with that, I think we've come to the end of our presentations for this evening. And so I'm going to ask Mr. Petherick to summarize for us.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think tonight really continued on with the theme that council had last week. I want to say last week, it was actually just earlier this week. Still looking at, the new staffing requests that have come forward from staff, as well as potential of trying to push off or delay, defer projects and try to find ways that maybe we can save money or defer money to future years, but also be able to utilize some of those freed up reserve funds to actually help reduce the tax levy. So I think that theme still played out for tonight.
Okay. Is there anything else you want to, any other direction you want to give to staff this evening before we send them away for the weekend to contemplate what council needs and wants? Councillor Cadeau.
I'm wondering if we can, before next meeting, just get a better sense of proposed debt financing of some of the projects, where that is going to come from, what types of stipulations would be on, like if we're talking going into debt for a project, what would the term of that be? Would we be looking at an interest rate of, X%? To give us just a better sense of what we would be potentially agreeing to over the next 5, 10, even more years.
Through Madam Mayor, I can't really say over 5 to 10 years, but I can tell you what's in our current plan. How's that? Yeah, because right now, looking at what we have as proposed, and the debt component is primarily within the infrastructure services capital budget. As it's laid out, almost $1.7 billion for the Braslaw Drain 1. So whether that be internally financed or we'd externally finance that repayment would come from the general levy. And you'd be looking at about $126,000 to $127,000 per year for the repayment. That's on a 20-year repayment plan. I believe that the current 20-year rate is 4.236 is what the last I heard. That was at the end of December. So who knows where the Bank of Canada is going to take us? We heard there might be another rate hike, hopefully not. The Peel Street Bridge, I think it's in the budget about $2.75 million. That would again be a levy repayment. That annual repayment would look about almost $206,000. Greenhouse Road, I think the debt requirement in the 23 budget is $835,000. Again, that annualized repayment is about $62,500.
Are these all over 20 years?
Yep, these are all over 20 years. And I think it's still appropriate to do that because again, you are thinking about it from the perspective, and hopefully your bridge will last longer than 20 years, but you're really trying to get the years that are utilizing that asset to kind of pay for that asset. That's kind of the thought process of why 20 years makes a bit of sense. The one that doesn't hit the levy that's in is the North Sanitary Pumping Station. So I think the all-in, you're going to be about $1.1 million for that project because there are some fundings or some expenditures that happen in 2022. The remainder will be in 2023. So when you start to get that, you'll start to see an annualized payment about $82,000, and that would hit the wastewater budget. That's where that would come from. So at least from a 2023's impact perspective, that's kind of what you're looking at. I think we'd have to do a fuller get into the rest of the capital budget. I can sort of put together a spreadsheet of what I said tonight and include, yes, I was not anticipating council to say, yeah, I remember everything you just said. Although I would remind that it is recorded, so you can always go back and look. But no, I will actually provide the spreadsheet with all of these numbers, as well as taking a look at the future capital budgets with those requirements and kind of break it down as to what an annualized payment would look like based on this current rate and 20 years. And of course, where that funding source would be coming from. So it gives council some good information.
And I'm assuming that you'll be reviewing our reserve funds on Monday as well when we talk about the finance piece, or at least a little bit of sort of a training piece too,
Sure.
in terms of
Yeah,
reserves and
yeah,
how it
absolutely.
fits.
Yeah, through Madam Mayor, absolutely. It is one of the projections that I put as far as attachment to the budget report. So through my area, I can actually kind of touch upon that and maybe explain a little bit more of it, for sure.
Okay. Anything else? No? David? I shouldn't have given him the floor, should I?
I guess what I'm thinking is this. Ultimately, would like maybe some input and direction from council in terms of whether, for example, on Monday, following the completion of all the presentations, whether you'd like to get some early indication of some of the areas that we might be looking at in terms of being able to help council and its desire to lower the tax rate. Just trying to understand from a timing perspective, when best to talk about some of the areas. However, I think we had the opportunity this week to, and again, thank you for providing us at the end of last meeting with some of your thoughts. That gave us an opportunity at this week's senior management meeting to talk about some of the areas. And so, what I'm thinking of here though is this, that one of the areas, that even council has asked about is, is there an opportunity to actually defer the start date, say for, I'll just take the senior planner position because of Bill 109 and Bill 23. However, that's an option if council is still convinced and sees the support and the rationale and justification for the need, right? And so, I don't know whether it's fair tonight and whether you want additional time to actually digest, where you sit as a council or individuals, with respect to the positions. Certainly heard one member of council or a couple of members of council comment on, you'd like us to maneuver to see how we would make the sustainability position happen. Again, don't have a sense yet about the full council. Our job, in terms of helping council, can also be in the area we've already talked about in terms of, deferring some of the more significant tax levy capital projects, right? And I mentioned tax levy because, as Richard mentioned earlier, where we're already using infrastructure reserve fund, et cetera, we have to maneuver a little bit more in terms of what capital, where would we reinvest that money, where you could look at the capital budget right now and say, okay, well, look at that particular infrastructure project has $350,000 in pure tax levy. Let's defer that, again, in the spirit of being sensitive to the economy and the taxpayers and the businesses and that sort of thing. So I raise all of this just to see if it generates any further input or insight that you may be willing to provide tonight on either the positions or, as I said, if we were seriously looking at, your question about deferring capital projects that had a tax levy component, are we on the right track? Because if we are, with, deferring, the start of some of the positions or the capital projects, that sort of thing, then I think we could be perhaps in a better position come Monday night to maybe have a list of some of these things. So again, though, if you want some additional time, because it has been quite a full day, I know for council, and a full week, that's perfectly fine too. But any insights you can provide as what you did on Monday, help us, help you ultimately.
Councillor Schwint.
So I didn't speak up on that Monday and have been doing some thinking. At this point, I struggle with the idea of, well, let's defer things by 6 months to save some money this year. Because all we're doing is tying our hands next year and future years. We're not going to hire somebody with the expectation we might fire them in 12 months. That's silly. So we have to make some hard decisions, I believe, over the next 2 or 3 weeks, whatever it is, to invest or not invest where appropriate. So I admit I'm struggling with some of the additional hires. I guess one in the planning department and in the fire department. I guess I challenged the department to look at ways to spread that resource around. Can we find ways to share that resource with this, with a city, with a township, or whatever, just gain efficiencies? I'd extend that challenge to all departments. I'm not at all in favor of deferring capital projects or renewing infrastructure like roads and bridges and that. We've done that for 20 years. We've got to get on with it. That doesn't say I'm not in favor of canceling the other one. The Peel Street Bridge, I'm really struggling with and think we need to take a hard look at the value for the entire township. That's my preliminary thoughts, but I reserve the right to flip flop.
Right reserved. Anyone else want to weigh in?
Earlier today, when I had sent that message to Richard, I had copied the senior management team and council on it. And it's just reiterating the point that I was trying to make the last time we met, but I just kind of fell short that Woolwich is consistently the lowest or second lowest for the past 10 years as far as our tax rates. So if we're staring down the barrel of a large tax increase, perhaps we can, point the finger back over the last 5, 10, 15, maybe even 20 years at, the failure to really dig in and make some of these difficult decisions that now we're being faced with. So I would remind people who are watching live, maybe tune into this after the fact, that we have historically been a very low tax rate community. And I don't want to continue to see services suffer. And I think that there is a need for investment in our staff. So, after hearing the presentations for the staff members, I am not convinced that we need them all. However, I am definitely leaning in the direction that the staff that have been proposed to us are absolutely what our staff need, because otherwise they wouldn't be asking. And they've made it very clear that, the ask was a lot more than, the 2.5 staff members that we have in front of us today. I would even take that a step further. I had made the comment when we had delegates here that's, the one that we had heard about is probably the one that is that resonates the most with me, and how we can really propel our community forward, hitting some of those key strategic buckets that we've been talking about for a long time now, but we really won't be able to make progress until we have dedicated staff that are trained and can really push the envelope. So I will just put that out there to staff, not to staff, to council, that perhaps we don't want to point at the request for staffing and say no to that. Perhaps that's what we should consider more so. And really show staff that we want to invest in them and we want the best to come to Woolwich and to work.
Councillor Grant.
Perhaps I will also reserve the right to flip-flop a bit. For myself personally, I really am struggling with the rate of taxation, with also the desire to see continued progress within the township. We know that Woolwich is the fastest growing, and I feel that there needs to be funding in place to reflect that. Like Councillor Cadeau, I feel that investing in staff is to our benefit. We've heard about numerous different positions, a sustainability officer that I feel is deeply important towards the township, not just from the perspective of residents living here today, but residents living here 50 to 80 years from now. We are at a climate crisis, and that is something that I feel that we need to take seriously in our deliberations. When it comes to the staffing selection, I would push, like Councillor Swinch said, this is me just flip-flopping back and forth, for the firefighting department to maybe investigate some of those other options about sharing a training officer with other townships, seeing if there are creative ways that we can address that need without necessarily going full budget. That being said, if the justification is there, I'm more than happy to support it. It's just a matter of I need to see that justification and that we've explored all the possible routes for that position. And the same would go, I would echo the same for the other departments in development and infrastructure. I just really need to see the justification. And as long as it's there, I'm more than happy to throw my support behind it. It's just, I want us to see or do our due diligence behind it.
Okay. Councillor Bryant.
I would just echo what I've been hearing from Eric and Kayla and everyone else. We need to do our due diligence. But one area I'm particularly thinking we can do without, and I see it as a want, was the electric vehicles. When I hear they're only paying 15,000 kilometers a year in mileage, how do we justify 2 brand new vehicles? To me, that's a want versus a need. And that would be one of my thoughts. Cut that right there. And there's 100,000 trimmed from the budget right off the bat. And then you're looking at the charging stations would not be needed either at this point in time. I know the trend is to go to electric, but I'm not convinced this is the way to move forward on that. And again, it's convince us, make us fully understand why and justify.
Councillor Grant.
Sorry, maybe just to piggyback on that, when it comes, just for maybe the context of staff, when it comes to providing justification, the sense that I got for those electric vehicles was more of an optics issue than it was an actual need. I know, for example, that the departments in the region of Waterloo use their own vehicles. I also know that when it comes to staffing, they do a work from home. They've actually removed many of their options for all their staff to come together and use a hoteling option. So even when it comes down to the $10,000 for 2 desks, it's a matter of, is it a need that we want our staff to be all together in one room, or is it a want? I think many people across the township and even the region could justify or could give examples of maintaining a workplace camaraderie from a work from home perspective, that it's not necessarily they need to be in a physical location to do it.
And I think we heard today that we are doing a considerable amount of that here already, right?
Through you, Madam Mayor, I mean, yes and no. I mean, in the sense of, you know, we're relatively new in terms of moving to hybrid. So in terms of getting back together after the pandemic, obviously to get staff back, especially since we did a number of new hires, and some people were meeting each other for the first time, you know, after a couple of years of working from home, et cetera. You know, we did establish a process where there's anchor days, and I think you heard that from staff. You know, as I said, in terms of some of the office tours we did today, that's not to say that our thinking shouldn't change for the future, because, you know, within the next 10, 15 years, you know, realistically, you could be out of the physical structure here. However, many organizations, us included, need to say, okay, capital costs of an addition versus hoteling type space in the office where you have staff share a space, again, in the spirit of being fiscally responsible. So, you know, can we look at that earlier? Sure, you know, absolutely. That's something we can look at. Just while I have the floor is, you know, I would, it's interesting, Councillor Cadeau's comment, because in the very first year of the last term of council, I'll say it because, you know, I'm sure it was on the record, that two of the brand new counselors, both former Counselor McMillan and former Counselor Redekop, asked the same question of the rest of council. Do we feel that since we're the largest township, the growing township, the one with the most demands in terms of services, programs, and infrastructure, that we need to continue to be the lowest tax rate in the region? What is the rationale, the justification for doing that if we have all of these needs for the residents and businesses to serve? So it is interesting that was brought up because it didn't get a lot of discussion in further years. However, a lot of that has to do with half the term was involved in a pandemic. And obviously we were trying to control costs in light of that. But it is a discussion that started the term. And it's interesting you brought it up at the start of this term because, a number of years ago, there's a lot of factors you can debate around the question I put to our Director of Finance. But, and this was probably going back about 7 or 8 years. I said to Richard, I said, let's look at the township that has the highest tax rate above us. And it was Wellesley. And I said, can you do some easy figuring in terms of if our tax rate was at that level, how much additional funding would we have in terms of investing in infrastructure, services, and programs? Now, back then, and I don't know what the difference would be now, but we conservatively estimated we have an additional $2.5 million of tax levy funding to be able to reinvest in township services, programs, and infrastructure. I only raise it because, again, there's other factors to consider. You could say, yeah, but we're growing faster, so we have an assessment base and all of that to rely on. But it's nevertheless a philosophical type of thing to consider in the context of what Councillor Cadeau has raised, is that there has never been a conscious decision to say, should we move off the focus on being the lowest tax rate and maintaining that position? So thank you for raising it. It'll be an interesting discussion for council to consider as well.
Anyone else? Okay. Well, then we will leave that with staff to ponder when they can't sleep at night and meet again on Monday. I need a motion that the meeting adjourns to meet again in special session on Monday, January 16th, 2023. Moved by Councillor Schwint, seconded by Councillor Burgess. All those in favor? And that is carried. Thank you, council. Thank you, staff. Thank you to everyone who tuned into the budget meeting tonight on our YouTube live stream. And again, I'll remind you to just, well, I guess all of you are here, so we don't have to worry about staying on, but until we're finished.
Good night, everybody.